For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started.
Hey everybody, today we are debating whether or not there was a flood of Noah, and we're starting right now. Hello friends, stoked to have you here for this epic debate. This is one that I was like long ago, this is like an idea that crossed my mind. I was like, that would be a really cool matchup to see Kent Hovind and Godless Engineer, as those are both popular gentlemen on YouTube. And I have to give credit to Standing for Truth. So Standing for Truth, if you're out there, his idea to bring these two influential YouTubers and speakers together for a debate. So want to say thanks for being here, everybody. We're stoked to have you. If this is your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we are trying to build an eclectic community. We want diversity of thought. So no matter where you are on the spectrum of Christian to atheist and all the strange creatures in between, we are thrilled to have you here. So with that, want to let you know we are thrilled to have both the speakers here, and we would just ask that for the Q&A, just want to let you know, if you put an @ModernDayDebate in the live chat, that'll make it a little easier for me to fish out all the questions. And you can also do a super chat in which you can make a comment toward one of the speakers that they would then get to respond to. The only thing we would just ask is warning people beforehand, if it's anything derogatory toward one of the debaters, we're trying to, let's see, how do I say it? We want them to feel as welcomed as possible, given that they're both coming for free. Like I feel like I personally owe them, and so you're 99.9% of everybody's always friendly, but once in a while there are people a little bit more aggressive than necessary. So with that, want to say both of the speakers have their links in the description. So Kent Hovind has his link, drdino.com, down in the description right now. So that box down there, see? Right there, and Godless Engineer has his YouTube channel linked down in the description as well. So that way, if you're enjoying this and you're like, hey, I want to check out more, hear more what these guys have to say, you can conveniently access their links right now. With that, want a quick read over the format. Just a quick couple of things. We just want to mention this because we try to plug them here and there. Is we have a charity that we're not sponsored. Like there's no we actually haven't even communicated with them. I just used to try to plug them in past debates, like in-person debates, and that is called Be the Match, and I'm showing them up on the screen. That's just a bone marrow donor registry. They cover all of the medical costs. If you feel led to donate your bone marrow, basically people who have leukemia or cancer of the blood, if you happen to match with them once your DNA is in their registry, basically they would give you a call and say, hey, somebody needs your help, will you donate? Like I said, they cover all the costs. You're just donating your bone marrow, and so they're linked in the description as well. Just want to give them exposure because there have been a lot of lives saved through that organization. Next up, want to just quick mention, I already did mention, speakers' links are in the description, and then I will just read off the format for today's debate. So thanks for your patience. But I really want to say first right away is thanks so much to the speakers for being here. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
You bet. Having a slight malfunction with changing the screen over, but I'm going to read the format, and that will be 8-minute openings. And given that Kent is taking the affirmative, he said he'd be willing to take the very first statement. So he'll give his opening, followed by Godless Engineer giving his opening, and then we will have 5-minute rebuttals, followed by 20 minutes of open discussion, 4 minutes of closing statements, and then 15 minutes of Q&A. So without any further ado, again, gentlemen, thanks for being here. I'm starting the clock for 8 minutes, Kent Hovind, and I will officially start the clock on your first word.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me on the program. My name's Kent Hovind. I was a high school science and math teacher 15 years. For the last 30 years, I've been an evangelist defending the Bible as being scientifically accurate and the evolution theory as being the dumbest and most dangerous religion in the history of humanity. And those are the nice things we say about it. Yes, I believe the Bible is clear. There was a flood. The Bible says the earth was corrupt before God. and all flesh had corrupted his way. And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh is coming, make an ark. And so they read Genesis chapter 6 and 7 and 8. The Bible could not be more clear. There was a flood, so Noah built the big boat. According to the Bible, Noah was about 600 years old when he went on the flood in the ark. Before the flood, the Bible teaches the people clearly lived to be, 900 years. That's what the Bible says. And there are hundreds of legends of a flood of a golden age when man used to live to be 1,000. And so I think that the Bible says, 900 some. But still, there are much historical evidence that indicates there was a time when man lived a long time, 900 years. And after the flood, the people's lifespans dropped off to 400, then 200, then 100. But if you read through the story, the Bible clearly teaches there was a flood. Second bit of evidence for a flood. So if someone such as John says there was no flood, he needs to just understand, I'm sure he does, you're saying the Bible is lying because the Bible clearly says there was a flood. So it's you versus the Bible, and that's your position to take that if you'd like. Number two, there are over 350 now flood legends that have been discovered. One of the speakers is coming to speak at our boot camp this weekend, Friday night, Saturday, and all day Sunday, or all day Saturday and Sunday morning, is Paul Abramson, who has a collection on his website, creationism.org, and you can read all the flood legends. Some are, of course, twisted and tweaked beyond reality, but that's normal for a legend to get twisted over the years. But why would there be 350 cultures around the world still talking about a time when the world was destroyed by a flood? The Hawaiian legend, for example, says, long after the death of Kunihana, the first man, the world became a wicked, terrible place to live. There was one good man left. His name was Nu'u. He made a great canoe with a house on it and filled it with animals. The waters came up over all the earth. All the people were killed. Only Nu'u and his family were saved. Exactly what the Bible says. Only it was Noah and his family. But the Chinese have an ancient legend called the Hiking Classic. You can look it up. They say Fuhai is the father of the Chinese civilization. And the story says Fuhai, his wife, 3 sons, and 3 daughters escaped a great flood. He and his family were the only people alive on earth after the flood, and they repopulated the world, which is, of course, what the Bible teaches. One man, his wife, 3 sons, 3 daughters, three wives, and they repopulated the world. The Toltec Indians in Mexico, when they were first discovered by white settlers coming into Mexico, the Toltec Indians legend says the first world lasted 1,716 years and was destroyed by a flood that covered the highest mountains. Only one family named Coxcox survived. It's interesting, 1716 is the date the Indians had put on it. Of course, their calendar may not have been the same as ours, but the Bible dates are 1656. So why would there be 330 now that have been discovered flood legends? I think it's because there was a flood. Go to creationism.org and read them for yourself. So if you have 330 different cultures around the world, unrelated, unconnected, all telling a similar story, maybe it's because the story is true, or at least based on truth. Third bit of evidence for a flood. If you've ever seen a rock tumbler, you put in fragments of rock and you let them tumble for a few days or weeks, and then you take them out and they're all rounded off. I live in a gravel pit, Lenox, Alabama. We have billions of rocks here. Gravel all over the world is rounded. Why would the gravel be rounded? There are layer after layer after layer of rounded gravel right here. We're sitting on top of it. For 50 years, they dug gravel out of this pit to make county roads. I can go to any town, USA, and you can go to any place in the world and find gravel, and it's rounded off. Very frequently, there'll be layers of gravel, then layers of clay, layers of gravel, layers of clay. We have 5 layers of gravel exposed on the hillside right here near my house. I take part of the tour I'll show you, John, when you come down. Between the layers of gravel is a layer of clay. Well, during Noah's flood, the moon would pull the tide up, and then the water would have to rush in to fill that bump at the same speed the earth is turning. I've got a globe here somewhere. Can you find that? The globe. Oh, right behind me. Okay. Thank you. The world is turning at this latitude, 31.3366 degrees north latitude, turning the other way, at nearly 900 miles an hour. If the moon is holding a bump of water up, the high tide, and there's no continents to interrupt it during Noah's flood, the tide would become harmonic. And instead of 6 or 7 foot tidal change, you'd get a 200-foot tidal change every 6.5 hours, which the water rushing sideways to fill that bump is going to cause rocks to be rolled all over each other at 900 miles an hour. And this would cause them to be rounded off like a big rock tumbler. During high tide, when it sits still for a half hour or an hour, the small fine particles settle out and you get a layer of clay. Clay is just rock particles much smaller than sand. And then you get another layer of gravel as the water rushes the other way. So we have layers of gravel, clay, gravel, clay. It's found all over the world. Just Google gravel layers and you'll see thousands of pictures on Google. And in between are layers of clay. This is an indication the water is moving sideways, not depositing from the stars or the sky. They're going to tell the kids in school the geologic column has different layers of different ages. I say, guys, where's this new material coming from? Outer space? You're building up younger layers on top of older layers? No, this is all lateral movement of the water. Had to form these layers very quickly. Oh, I'm going to run out of time here.
2 minute
If you look at the country of Turkey, on the far eastern side over there is a little town called Noah Ungumshi, which means Noah's big boat. They've got signs, you drive right to it. The Turkish government says they have found Noah's Ark. The Bible says the ark rested in the mountains, plural of Ararat, mountains. And so I talk in my seminar about the Noah's Ark being found there, right here. Life magazine published an article in 1960, high altitude spy plane took pictures, and there in the middle of a lava flow is a boat-shaped object. 1978, there was a volcanic earthquake, and either it popped up or the ground fell down. The result's the same. It's now sticking up out of the ground. And this boat-shaped object is 515 feet long, the exact dimensions that Noah's Ark was supposed to be, only it's wider than it should be because it would splay out as it collapsed and rotted away. And when lava or mud flows around in a stationary object like a rock or something, it does make a teardrop shape, just like this. However, this one's facing the wrong way. The point of the teardrop would be downstream. Many people have studied this object and say, that's Noah's Ark. The government of Turkey built a visitor center. You can go see it. Let's see. Right, coming up here. Boat-shaped object on Doomsday Mountain. There we go. The government of Turkey confirms, yep, that's Noah's Ark, and there's their visitor center, and you can go see it. So I think you have to say there is enormous physical evidence right now saying Noah's Ark could be there. Let me get 165 here. Okay. So 70% of the Earth today is covered by sedimentary rock. This can only happen in something like a flood. Gravel is rounded worldwide. The ark's been found. There are underwater canyons. There are polystrata fossils all over the place. There's enough water on the Earth right now to cover the Earth 8,000 feet deep. There's plenty of water for a flood to happen if you just simply adjust the crust of the Earth, push the mountains down, lift the ocean basins up. So Jesus said there was a flood. The Bible says there's a flood. John says there's no flood. I want to hear this. Go ahead, John.
You got it. Thank you very much, and just in time. Next up, we will go to the opening statement from John. And I should also ask the debaters, the old habit is we usually say like 60 seconds, 40 seconds. If you'd like me to give hand signs for like minutes, like 2 minutes, 1 minute, if that's your preference, I can do that too. That way I don't interrupt your speech. So.
5.
Cool. Okay. You bet. So.
No, I mean, you can just interrupt me and tell me.
Okay, you bet. Let's see. Got it set for 8 minutes, and the floor is yours, John.
All right. What's up, heathens that are in the chat? So first I want to say thank you, James, for putting this together. Thank you, Kent, for the opportunity to debate you. I've been watching, your sermons and everything like that online for years now. And how wrong you've been has actually taught me a lot about science. So I appreciate that. Now, this debate is ultimately about basic geology versus the Bible. Or you could think of it as uniformitarianism versus catastrophism. Now, prior to modern geology and the concept of uniformitarianism, we had catastrophism. And basically what catastrophism says is that the Earth was formed in the way that it is now through successive catastrophes that happened, with the most recent one being the flood. And catastrophism has been disproven since the early 19th century. It's a largely dead debate, but it's only coming around because of the creationist crowd. So just to give you a little bit of history on this, James Hutton was the first to propose the idea of uniformitarianism. He didn't call it that, but it was that idea. He did this in the 1790s. He proposed that the Earth was formed over long periods of time by uniform processes of nature. In 1830, Charles Lyell picked up where Hutton left off and built off of Hutton's ideas. He used observational evidence to establish what would eventually become the primary tenet of geology. That tenet is the idea that uniform processes have shaped our world. Through wind and water erosion, valleys are carved out, pebbles are rounded off. These slow changes over long periods of time is the most probable explanation for how our Earth came to be what it is now. So I feel like the evidence for uniformitarianism is well established. So I have a lot of problems with the flood model. For one thing, it would require 2.25 quintillion meters cubed of water, more than what we have here on Earth. Okay. No, it's fine. This seems to be a very prominent problem with Kent's infrastructure. I think the compound probably regulates how much internet they have. I mean, it is Alabama. Just saying. Oh no, yeah, he's in Alabama. Yeah, I don't think that he like rage quit or anything like that. I think that he just has shitty internet.
Hey, we're back. Can you hear me okay? I don't. Well, no, according to evolution, things get better automatically. You would think it would happen with computers. I mean, they're simple compared to a human cell.
Our router reset.
Our router reset, Steve said.
Oh, hold on, James. I think nobody can hear you.
I hear James just fine.
Sorry, folks, I had myself muted on Streamlabs. Basically, we are good to go. We're thrilled to have Team Hovind back. I was afraid it was a power outage, but we're good. So we're going to start it back up. Godless Engineer has 5 minutes and 20 seconds. Thanks, everybody, for your patience out there. Glad you're sticking with us. And, John, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I'll start at my most recent section. So I have a lot of problems with the flood model because I feel like uniformitarianism and basic geology have been well supported throughout time. So it's really up to me to, explain why the flood model doesn't make sense. So for one thing, it would require 2.25 quintillion meters cubed of water more than what we have here on Earth. Now, I've been watching a lot of you, Kent, and it seems like maybe you still follow this whole hydroplate theory. And it doesn't actually hold any water, pun intended. For one thing, where did the water go exactly once it retreated? Where did all of that water go? That's a lot of extra water on this planet. Did it retreat back underneath the tectonic plates or something like that? Where did it go? That's one question I would like answered. The inability of the flood model to answer this basic question, which I know I haven't given Kent the chance to answer yet, but hopefully he'll try to come up with an answer. But I feel like the flood model doesn't have the ability to answer questions like this, and it's because of that these things just don't make sense. Like the things that are in the flood model do not make actual sense in observed reality. For one thing, Kent says that this water underneath the tectonic plates were under great pressure, and when the Earth's crust cracked, when God made them crack magically, apparently that pressure was so great that it caused the water to explode out of these fault lines. And I just want to know where this pressure was coming from. Like, I get that you say that the crust was sort of floating on top of this, but even so, you would need a pressure from inside, the Earth, from the inner core pushing out on it in order to get the directional vector that would be spurting out of the crust. So was the inner Earth expanding? What was causing that pressure from the center of the Earth to cause the fountains of the deep to erupt? And if so, what happened? Did just the Earth get bigger? The mass of the Earth would get bigger because obviously rock and everything that the inner core and outer core is made out of is much denser than water. So that would mean that the Earth would have been lighter in the past or something. I'm not exactly sure how that works out, but it raises a lot of questions. But that's kind of the point of this whole line here, is that these alternative explanations that you have and you've always espoused only cause us to ask more questions that you can't actually answer. And it's because they break the natural order of things in observable reality. And they do so before supernatural reasons. Supernatural explanations for things have never actually explained anything. All supernatural explanations have been replaced by actual natural explanations that are observable and repeatable. You may claim that mountains weren't as big as, say, Mount Everest, because I know that you pointed out in your intro there how there's enough water on the earth to conceivably, raise the water level 8,000 feet. And I haven't actually checked that number, but assuming that you're correct, you would actually need a whole lot more water in order to flood the entire earth. But then that pushes you into the position of having to move the goalpost. Because when I point that out, you'll just say, oh, all of the mountains were, let's say, less than 8,000 feet tall. Well, then you're just special pleading your way through this argument, and it's very dishonest. Because there's no way for you to know how tall they were. Only that God supposedly flooded the entire earth, and the only thing that we know is that these very tall mountains existed at one point in time. And we can test like how old Mount Everest is and when it formed and all of that, and it's more than 6,000 years. It takes more than 6,000 years in order for a mountain like Mount Everest to actually form. And it wasn't done by catastrophe, because guess what? Catastrophe never forms mountains in the way that you say. It never does any of those things that you talk about, because there's no observable evidence for it. There's no evidence in geology for it. So you're basically just putting out assertions and not actually backing them up with science or evidence. Now, you sort of alluded to some evidence, like finding Noah's actual ark in Turkey. I'm wondering if you know what pareidolia is, because that's exactly what you showed me is pareidolia. I mean, it looks like a boat, and I guess it could be a boat, so therefore it is Noah's ark. That's not how anything works. That particular mountain range, that formation is not a boat. It's just a regular natural formation. It looks like a boat to us because that's what a boat looks like. But just because it looks like it doesn't mean that it's actually it. Just like how faces seem to appear on the ass end of helicopters and shit. Those aren't actually faces. They're not actually sentient beings. They're not Autobots or Decepticons. Okay. Those aren't things. So to go through your intro here while I still have time. How much time? Oh, okay. So that's the end of it. So I appreciate your time here. There was a lot that I didn't cover, like the magnetic field and how that works, how the fault lines work with basalt and magnetism, which I'm sure that he'll bring up. But I think that the Bible is lying to everybody. I don't think that it's telling the truth about. That's fine. Steve.
I was on silent again for the audience. We are now moving to the rebuttal phase. 5 minutes for Kent, and thank you for your patience. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here again. Yes, the Bible clearly teaches there was a worldwide flood, and the Bible clearly teaches there was water under the crust of the earth. Psalm 24, the earth is the Lord's. He founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. The crust of the earth was above the water, according to Psalm 24. He founded it upon the flood. Psalm 33, he layeth up the depth in storehouses. What is now the deep, the oceans, used to be stored in the crust of the earth. Psalm 136, similar. What he referred to, the hydroplate theory, I do strongly believe all the scientific evidence points to this being literally true and scientifically accurate and plausible. There was a layer of water under the crust of the earth. There is still enormous amounts of water in the crust of the earth. They have underwater vents. When they got down to the bottom of the ocean in 1977, Jacques Cousteau discovered tens of thousands of underwater hot water vents shooting water up into the bottom of the ocean. Well, duh, it has to be coming from lower than that, or it can't be shooting up into the bottom of the ocean. There are tens of millions of hot water vents. So the Bible clearly teaches there was water in the crust of the earth. The scientific evidence shows us there is still water in the crust of the earth. And the Bible says the fountains of the great deep broke open. You asked, John, where did this pressure come from? Well, this is, I know you're an engineer, but you're a different kind of engineer. It's called gravity, okay? The fountains of the deep broke open. Rock on top of water would exert pressure just by simple gravity. And if it can ever find a place to get out, it'll come squirting to the surface. A cubic foot of rock weighs about 160 to 180 pounds, depending what kind it is. And if you stack it up 10 miles high, you got 30 tons per square inch. Just simply gravity. There's your pressure. You mentioned pressure inside the earth? Well, no, it's just simple gravity pulling the rock down. Once the rock cracks and finds a place the water finds a place to escape, it'll launch things out into orbit. All you have to do is get up to escape velocity. At the surface, it's about 25,000 miles an hour and diminishes rapidly as you leave the effective gravitational pull of the Earth. So it's common sense. Maybe the craters on the moon were caused by stuff being blasted off of Earth and the moon eventually running into it. It is clear that the near side of the moon, the crater system is very different than the far side of the moon, indicating something was different back then. And there are huge craters all over the Earth, probably from the rocks that blasted out. So I cover all this on video number 2, which you can get and return after you got to pay for it. Then buy it, watch it, copy it, send it back, $50 for the whole series. Video number 2 would really help you. So you asked about where did the rocks come from? Where did the water go? John, it's still here. It's in the oceans. The oceans are huge. The oceans today cover 70% of the planet. The oceans average 12,000 feet deep. The continents average less than 3,000 feet high. If you smoothed out the earth right now, the water would be 8,000 feet deep everywhere. You said there's not enough water to cover the earth. For heaven's sake, a cup of water would cover the earth if you spread it real thin. I said years ago that 1 drop would cover the earth if you spread it real thin. That's true, but you get down to just a few molecules per square centimeter. But it's true, 1 drop would cover the earth. So 8,000 feet of water worldwide would be the average if the earth were smoother. If you push the continents down, raise the ocean floors up. So where did the water go? It's still here. It's in the oceans. Come on down to Lenox, Alabama. We'll drive down to Pensacola Beach. I'll show it to you. And you can see where the water went from Noah's flood. You mentioned about this debate is really about geology and versus the Bible. I love earth science. I taught earth science for 15 years. Be glad to have a quiz on that with you if you'd like. But the catastrophism, the idea that there was a catastrophe, is not a dead debate at all. It was something that the uniformitarian guys, like the evolutionists like James Hutton you mentioned, they kind of took over the market here, but they just flat lied. I'll show you just a second here. I've only got 1 minute left. Slide 382. See, I've got over 10,000 slides, so it kind of helps if you ask the questions in the same order that I have the answer. Okay, there's James Hutton. He wrote a book, Theory of the Earth, 1795, the year before he died. He said the Earth is much older than everybody thinks. His book published 1795. This was also a time of many revolutions worldwide. People were trying to get rid of the king. It's called the age of anti-monarchy. Get rid of the king. America was involved. We got rid of the king. The American Revolution, the French, the Spanish, the Polish, the Italian. The Bible says to honor the king, and some people thought this was an obstacle to their political objectives. So they were looking for a way to demonize the Bible. And so most people thought the earth was a few thousand years old. James Hutton came along and said, no, it's millions of years old. He developed a dumb idea of uniformitarianism, which is that the present is the key to the past. The Bible's the only reliable key to the past. But I cover in my seminar all kinds of, seminar part 4, lies in the textbooks, about the crazy geologic column, which does not exist any place on the planet except in the textbooks. I'm in a room full of textbooks here. Come on down, I'll show it to you. There is no geologic column, John. It doesn't exist. The flood formed all those layers in 1 year. All right, time's up.
Thanks so much. We appreciate it. And now we will go into the rebuttal from Godless Engineer. So, John, I've got the clock set for you, and I will start it on your first word. I think we might have you on mute yet. I'll reset the timer. Go ahead.
All right, so that was painful. So now, starting from back when Kent first started in his opening there, Kent starts out with his entire basis for why he thinks the Earth is 6,000 years old and why a flood actually happened. That would be because the Bible says. And that's ultimately what Kent leans on here to justify his idea that an actual flood existed. And then he moves on from that position to find evidence in reality that seems to support his position, even if he has to distort that. Like, for instance, saying the rock cycle isn't a real thing. I don't know what that was about, but that's just ridiculous. He also stated how people used to live to about 1,000 years old or something like that. That's actually not supported by anything that we have, like in either biology or history in general. It's not supported anywhere other than in the Bible, because the Bible says. Then he said the thing about whether or not you think that the Bible is lying. Of course, I think the Bible's not necessarily lying. Sorry, maybe that was a little bit of a gotcha kind of statement, because I don't think that the Bible was meant to record history. I think that it was meant to teach theology. And when you're looking to teach theology instead of history, you don't get history. But a lot of people want to read history into theology. So... and then he talks about the 350 flood legends. Just because there's a lot of flood legends out there doesn't mean that the flood actually happened or that the Bible is correct. I'm sure floods have happened like all over the earth. People have come up with floods or have experienced floods in probably just about every continent. He talked about the rounded gravel. That's got a very easy explanation of water erosion. And then he talked about the earth spinning at 900 miles per hour at a certain thing as a way that these rocks would have become rounded off. And I don't know why you think that whatsoever. For one thing, the reference frame of the earth would have the rocks moving at the exact same speed, so it wouldn't feel any kind of change in velocity or whatnot other than whatever forces are acting on it, because it's moving along with the earth. Also, because I do a lot of flat earth debunking, I know that the speed from a reference frame outside of the earth is not applicable to a reference frame on the earth. So on the earth is spinning at like 0.000 6 something rotations per minute. So it's moving very, very slow. So that particular thing just doesn't make sense whatsoever when you consider, reality. And then you're talking about the geologic column forming quick, or all of those layers of the geologic column forming quick. And then you say that the geologic column doesn't actually exist later on. So maybe you can explain what you mean there.
John, we lost you, I think. Can you hear me?
Oh, shit. Sorry.
That's all right.
So the geologic column is an actual thing. You can actually go and you can see it. And the reason why we know that this is a thing that happens is because it's what we observe in reality. It also matches everything else that we find in reality, like the radioactive decay rates and how fast that happens for particular elements. And you can run those on the particular layers, and you can double check to see that this is actually that old. Now you do get a date range because of how imperfect the dating is, but you do get a pretty good range, and it is not in the thousands of years. It's actually in the millions of years old. You talked about underwater caverns. Yeah, underwater like caverns exist and they have water in them. I would say that that's a product of gravity pulling water down as far as it can. Like if there's a cavern that water can get into, it's going to fill it. So I don't know what that was supposed to prove. Again, with the 8,000 feet of water being able to cover the earth, you talked about how a drop of water could cover the entire earth. While true, that doesn't mean that the entire earth was flooded. Also, my calculations for how much extra water would be needed, like the volume of extra water was needed, includes the current diameter of the earth, which would include sea level. So it would already include how much water is on the earth. I'm saying you need, on top of the water that's already here, you would need that much. So that's the explanation for that. Now, in your little diagram of the water...
It's actually a time, so...
Oh, sorry, I didn't know.
No, that's all right. I just realized it myself. I'm trying to keep up with the questions coming in. With that, we will go to the open discussion. So anybody, if you have your questions, feel free to put them in the live chat, and I will try my very hardest to get to all of them. We have a kind of doing a short and sweet spiel today, so we really won't get to all of them, but we're going to try to go as fast as we can. So for the open discussion, we have got about 20 minutes, and starting the timer now. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
The floor is whose? His or mine? And are we discussing the questions, or what he just said is another rebuttal? I don't know.
This is just open discussion.
Yeah, it's an open discussion. I just used a lot of time, so if you want to ask me a question or explain something to me, as long as it doesn't go too long, I mean,
Sure.
I would say go ahead and ask.
You made quite a few, I would say, false statements about me. You accused me of distorting things and being dishonest. I resent that greatly, and I think that's slander on your part. You said my only basis for believing this is because the Bible says, and I clearly showed you that is not correct. I do believe the Bible is true, but that is only one. All the scientific evidence also points to there being a worldwide flood. All the historical evidence points to there being a flood. So don't say I only use the Bible for this. That's a way for you to cop out of giving an honest answer. I gave you nine.
No. I'm not trying to cop out of giving an honest answer. Can I address this real quick?
Sure. I gave 9 reasons why. One of them was the Bible.
Okay. No, if you actually listen to what I said that the basis of your belief is the Bible. Now, I'm kind of curious, if you found evidence in reality that the Bible was wrong in some kind of way in this context, would you say that the Bible is always correct, or would you say that the Bible is wrong in that instance?
If you can find evidence that shows the Bible is wrong, I will admit it was wrong. If I can show you evidence the Bible is right, or that evolution is wrong, or that the geologic column is wrong, will you change, John?
If you could actually prove it, yeah, sure. But the problem is that you can't. None of your evidence actually proves that the Bible's correct and that evolution's wrong.
Okay. So you mentioned the 1,000 years not supported anywhere. I told you clearly the Bible says people live to be 900, and clearly there are hundreds of legends of a golden age. So I gave, again, historical evidence for a time when people lived to be nearly 1,000. Why would there be legends of a golden age when people lived to be 1,000 and died peacefully in their sleep? I didn't make people that never heard of the Bible have these legends. So I didn't just give biblical evidence, I gave historical evidence, John.
Kent, there are legends of a dragon that enters the upper atmosphere and swallows the sun. Is that correct?
Well, this is called a red herring. You're diverting the point.
No. You brought up legends. Hold on. You're saying it's a red herring. It's not, because you brought up how legends prove your point, and I'm saying that there are legends out there that are obviously wrong. So why do you think that these legends are correct?
Well, I'm pointing out that it is supported. It supports what the Scripture also clearly teaches. There's certainly historical evidence that this happened. There are legends that an amoeba turned into a whale. The stupid legend of evolution teaches that. Why do you believe such a thing? That's a legend.
Wait. Wait, hold on. Say that again.
A single-celled creature like an amoeba turned into a whale. Do you believe whales and humans and mosquitoes have a common ancestor?
Okay. Well, I'll address this, but I want to say that this is not actually the debate that's being had.
Well, you say you debunk the Bible. Okay, go ahead.
Huh?
You say one of your things is to go around debunking the flood or debunking the Bible, and so I just thought you must believe in evolution. That's the only alternative.
No. I mean, I debunk creationism, but yeah. So is that how you think evolution actually works?
I can show you straight from the textbooks. I'm sitting in a room with hundreds of them. An amoeba.
Do you think an amoeba turns into a whale?
Over millions of years, the amoeba, they have lines on paper connecting the whale, the human, and the amoeba. Yes, that's what they're teaching the kids.
No, they're teaching the kids that single-celled life started out, and then many different organisms occurred, and we can trace those through the fossil record, and we can figure out how a land quadruped eventually turned into like whales and dolphins. And we know that this happened. One of the main reasons is because they have vestigial hind legs that don't work and actually sometimes protrude from their bodies when they're caught. So evolution doesn't actually say what you're saying. You're really reducing it down, and it makes me feel like you think one day a amoeba split through asexual reproduction or whatnot, and a whale just immediately appeared. Is that what you're saying, or?
No, I think you're trying to hide the stupidity of the religion of evolution, because your religion does teach that whales and amoeba came from an amoeba over millions of years, and your idea that the whale has vestigial hind legs is showing your gross inadequacy in biology. The whale has bones in their abdomen that are used for mating. The whales have a 15-foot penis. They have to mate underwater in the dark with no arms, and they can't talk and say scoot over. They got special muscles that have to move this thing around in the dark at 3,000 feet below sea level. Yes, that whale that's not a vestigial pelvis. They never had a leg. It's part of their mating system. Study some anatomy. I've got one of the bones here.
Wait, yeah, I'm sorry, Ken. You cut out there. They have a 15 what?
15? I didn't cut out. You heard me. Google it yourself. Whales have to mate underwater in the dark they can't talk, and they have no arms. This is part of the reproductive system, John. You need to study your whale anatomy before you claim that's a vestigial hind leg sticking out of their body. You are mistaken. Will you admit you are wrong? Will you admit you are wrong on that? Whales are not evidence for evolution. They don't have a leg. And even if they did, that would be losing something, not gaining something. The only example
no, actually, it's proof of change. They didn't necessarily lose something. They just changed with the environment that they're in, which is still part of evolution. So they didn't lose anything. They just changed to suit their environment, and it happened over millions of years. So that's not.
There's a picture of the bones right here you're referring to. The textbook says many organisms retain traces of their evolutionary history. For example, the whale retains pelvic and leg bones as useless vestiges. And your books do show all of the creatures going back to a common ancestor, the whales, the fish, the humans, the starfish, the mosquitoes, the clams, all having a common ancestor, which was single cell. That's what they're teaching in the biology books. That's
because that's actual science. And I love how you pulled up an actual thing that talks about how there's a leg bone in a whale.
They're calling it a leg bone, and it's not a leg bone. This is a biology textbook. There's the reference for it. The book's right on the shelf. I'm pointing out the books are lying. It's not a leg bone. It's part of their reproductive system. This textbook says, just imagine whale. Here they are right here in the Los Angeles Museum. There's the bones. That's not a remnants of a leg bone. If it was losing a leg, that would be an example of losing, not gaining.
Can I ask something? You think that those little bones right there can control a 15-foot penis?
Those bones do control the whale's mating system. They're different in the male and female.
You've got
some whale anatomy. But if that's the best you've got for evidence for evolution, that's an example of losing, not gaining. Dolphins have similar bones in their abdomen. It's not a vestigial leg. You guys are lying when you teach that.
One sec.
It's not a vestigial leg.
Hold on one sec. I just
National Pornographic says it.
Got people in the live chat asking if we could go back to the flood of Noah, and I think that's just
the bone right there.
Yeah, so I'm sorry that I went down this particular track. My bad. I shouldn't have indulged myself. Okay, so let me ask you this. You said that James Hutton was an evolutionist?
I didn't say he's an evolutionist. He's one of the first ones to teach the Earth is millions of years old. He began
my bad. I misheard.
Revolution. I don't know what he believed on evolution. His theory of the Earth being millions of years old started all this. See, without millions of years, the evolution theory looks real stupid. I think it looks stupid with millions of years, but without the millions, gee, now it's a frog turning to a prince with a kiss. But somehow in your mind, if the frog takes millions of years, it'll turn to a prince. Oh, that's science. It's still a fairy tale. So James Hutton just supplied the magic ingredient of millions of years in the imagination of the evolutionists. There you go. There's the whale's bones right there, and that's what it controls. Do some whale anatomy study, and you will see, wow.
Wait, what does it control? What does it control?
You get all excited about that topic, don't you, John? Are you a pervert or something? Okay. God created reproduction. It's perfectly fine. And the whales have to do that to make baby whales. And those are not a vestigial leg bone. I'm pointing out you're mistaken or you're lying. It's not a vestigial pelvis. It's part of their reproductive system. It's in all the books because that's the best evidence you guys have.
One sec. So sorry.
It's stuff
hate to
like
interrupt.
this.
Look, we're still on evolution, and we need to get back to the flood. I tried to change
Okay.
that, but I brought up. I'm sorry, I brought up the whole evolutionist thing. My bad. That I'm sorry about that.
Not a problem.
So what other questions do you have for me, Kent, about the flood?
Well, you mentioned that gravel is formed from simple erosion. Would you show me where this happens in layers that are thousands of square miles of rounded gravel? And you mentioned that the earth is turning, the rocks are turning with the earth. I understand that. I taught physics. I can explain it to you carefully. I said, if you'll listen to the tape, when the moon pulls the water up, the water has to rush sideways. It's true the earth is turning, but if there's a high tide here and a low tide here, all that water had to come from sideways. It is sideways movement of water during the tidal change. I didn't say that rocks aren't moving with the earth. Of course they are. That's common sense 101. But when you get the water being lifted up or pulled up by the moon like a magnet or gravity, the water has to rush to fill that bump. That's what's going to cause the erosion, underwater erosion, and the rounding of the gravel.
My bad, because when I heard you talk before, it sounded like you were trying to make up some kind of explanation for it or something like that. If water erosion is why you say that there are rounded rocks and everything, then I would agree.
And they're worldwide. There are trillions of them, of rounded rocks.
Yeah, because the oceans touch continents worldwide.
So does this only happen along the beach line?
Well, no, it would occur where the water is. Have you never been to like a river where it's got running water and there's like you find smooth rocks in it?
Oh, exactly. Of course. I have studied this intently. But have you ever been to a gravel pit like Lenox, Alabama, where there are thousands of them in a nice, neat layer and then there's no river anywhere inside?
Well,
and then there's a layer of clay
you realize that over the course of the Earth's history, like, there's been water like in different places, like.
Oh, that's the point of this debate. There's been water over the whole earth at one time called Noah's flood. That's the point of the debate.
I literally mean that like there are water beds that are now dry.
Oh, no, that I would agree with. Go get me some petrified clams that are closed.
There are water beds that are dry now because in the past they were full of water, so you would find rounded rocks there because in the past there was a waterway there, or there was a lake, or there was a river or something like that, and then shit changed and there's no longer a lake or a river there.
Well, I'd like to point out for the audience, you've had something in your mouth 4 or 5 times in the last hour that I wouldn't hold in my hand, but that's okay. You seem to have that kind of vocabulary. That's fine. The rounded rocks don't form in a lake. This is moving water. And I pointed out there are thousands of square miles of continuous limestone beds, for instance. Sedimentary rock. 70% of the earth is covered by sedimentary rock. When they got to the top of Mount Everest in 1953, the year I was born, 1956, I'm sorry, 3 years later, when they got to the top of Mount Everest, they found petrified clams in the closed position.
Okay,
Clams
good. I'm glad that you brought that up. Okay,
that's evidence of a flood.
No, it's not evidence of a flood. On the scientific model, on the geologic model, how does it explain that exactly? I want to know.
Well, I would like to point out that there's a difference between the scientific model and the current evolutionary model. Evolution has no science to back it up. Here are some petrified clams in the closed position. Go to the beach. When clams die, they open, something eats them, and it's hard to find a matched pair of seashells. But yet there are petrified clams 10 feet thick in northern Alabama, where you live, John. Ask around, where are the giant beds of petrified closed clams 10 feet thick in northern Alabama? I think this indicates rapid burial. Fossils don't form at all today in any significant numbers. When animals die, the coyotes and buzzards scatter them all over the woods. Yet we find fully articulated skeletons, dinosaurs 80 feet long. All the bones are still connected. This thing had to be buried rapidly in mud, rapid deposition of mud. You need to watch my video number 6. But no, fossils are found, petrified clams in the closed position. This is an indication that they were buried quickly before they could even open.
You didn't answer my question. You didn't answer my question, by the way.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Try again.
My question was, how does the current geological or scientific model explain this? Please do not say evolution one more time.
Okay, the current scientific model cannot explain it.
No, actually, the current scientific model can explain it because mountains are formed when the tectonic plates and the shit like merges together, like they hit and they form a mountain. Mountains form slowly over time. From the bottom of the ocean or whatnot, where these things would have been buried and formed, would have gotten pushed up and put on top of a mountain. That's why you would find like sea animals and everything like that fossilized at the top of a mountain.
I understand.
If that's correct, why didn't you say that?
No. Do you think clams are dying at the bottom of the ocean today and being in the closed position? When clams died all along,
I think that they could have been rapidly buried, and then the fossilization process would have eventually occurred. Because you're right, we don't see fossilization happening like right in front of our eyes because it takes a long time for fossilization to happen.
Why on earth would you say that? I've got a fossilized pickle in our museum. We have a petrified teddy bear. There's a place in Czechoslovakia where there's a little waterfall and it splashes high mineral content water. People go set roses around there and they fossilize. They get mineral content coated, turned to stone in 2 or 3 days. Why? Who taught you it took millions of years for fossilization? Somebody, you need to get your money back for that education. That's not true.
I actually didn't specify an amount of time, but I just said that it takes a very long time to happen. And it takes a very long time to happen naturally as opposed to whatever the fuck you just brought up.
If fossilization takes millions of years, the creature is going to rot before that. They find fossilized soft tissue like octopus arms. Squids are found fossilized. Single-celled creatures are found fossilized. Fossilization does not take millions. I've got pictures of animals, fish, giving birth, fossilized with the baby halfway out. It does not take millions of years to have a baby, John. This is a rapid process. I delivered one of my kids at home.
Can you explain what fossilized, like what a fossil actually is? Can you explain?
There are several different types of fossilization. Generally, it's the minerals in the water replacing the cells in the exact same shape of the cell. Petrified wood is a classic example. All the cells are gradually replaced by minerals, and it can be all sorts of different colors depending upon the mineral. In this case, largely calcium, I think. But fossilization happens. There's a replacement fossil where there's probably actually no clam left. It's now rock in the place of the clam because it rotted away. There is impression fossil. Yeah, there's several different methods of happening. I taught earth science for 15 years. If you'd like to have a quiz on that, I'll take you on. But the fossilization does not take millions of years. They make fossils in the laboratory in 20 minutes. High pressure, lots of minerals, put pressure, turn a soft tissue into stone in 20 minutes. They can make coal in 20 minutes in the laboratory. They can make oil in 20 minutes. There's a factory in Texas.
We're not talking about the laboratory.
Okay, there's a factory in Texas. They slaughter turkeys by the millions next door to make, sell the turkeys. They give all the guts and feathers and beaks and feet to the place next door. They put them under heat and pressure and turn it to oil in 20 minutes. This is ancient technology. 30 years ago, they've been doing this. The oil in the earth is from the flood in the days of Noah when animals were buried. The coal in the earth is from the flood of Noah when forests were buried. The fossils on top of the
hold on. What did you say they do with the turkeys?
They sell. I showed the reference. I can't find it now. I got 10,000 slides. But they take all the turkey guts, the stuff they don't want. They slaughter the turkey. They put the offal, I think they call it, OFF. What's the name for that? Turkey offal. They sell it to the place next door by the truckloads, and they use heat and pressure to convert it to oil, which you can run in your car in 20 minutes. They can do this. They've been doing this for 30 years. It's cheaper to drill it and get the oil out of the ground, but it can be done, which shows all you need is heat and pressure and 10 miles of rock.
How is it cheaper to spend millions of dollars drilling shit out of a ground when you can just harvest a whole bunch of fucking turkeys?
I think I would appreciate you. I have an audience that loves God and doesn't appreciate your cursing and swearing. Are you capable of talking without the cursing, or is this just ingrained in? Does this make you feel smarter? By the way,
no, it doesn't. That's just how I talk because I'm actually from Alabama.
Okay. Well, you used a verb as an adjective there. You need to study grammar also. But, okay. Fossilization can happen rapidly. Oil can be produced rapidly. Coal can be produced rapidly. The flood would deposit layers of mud over whole forests, squeeze the forest down, and produce coal in seams. Why is coal always found in seams, sometimes really huge seams? John, you don't want to believe the flood because that demonstrates God's ability to judge his creation. He's going to judge you one day, John. I'm trying to help you. I'll be the best friend you got.
I really don't need your help, and I'm not your friend.
You're going to stand before the very God you don't believe in, and he's going to say, John, you should have listened to Kent. We're all going to hear it.
Honestly, if Christians like you and like the new independent fundamentalist Baptists are like Christians that are going to be going to heaven, I would rather burn in hell.
Okay. See you there. I did my best, Lord. I tried. I was lifeguard, If somebody's drowning and they don't want you to save them, okay, let them drown.
Sorry,
okay.
Gentlemen.
Anyway,
we will next.
Questions from the audience.
You bet. Q&A time. So thanks for your questions, everybody. And with that, give me 1 sec. Okay. So first up, thanks for your super chat, Brian Stevens. By the way, everybody, if you could do me a favor, I know that Kent had requested if the questions could pertain to today's debate topic, and then Godless Engineer, that's up to you if you're willing to field questions outside of the topic, if you'd like the questions for you to stick to the topic.
Any questions? Fair game with me.
I'm fine with all the questions.
Okay. Any questions then? So, Christopher, I think you had one on Old Testament, something on Leviticus. I'll try to dig that up. Sorry, I told you we couldn't take that one. Brian Stevens said, thanks for hosting the debate. Hopefully we can all stand in unity against the NIFB's hateful message about wanting the LGBT community put to death. Death threats to anyone in capital letters are not acceptable. I don't know exactly what the NIFB is, but we hope that if you happen to identify as LGBT, we welcome you here. We love you. We think God loves you, and not everybody's going to agree with you here, whether it be people in the live chat or moderators all the time, but we do love you and we welcome you here. So, Ronald Madanka, thanks for your super chat as well. If you guys, either of you want to respond to that super chat, you can. I don't know. I wasn't sure if it was toward the channel or toward you guys, but.
Well, I would like to say that today is actually the anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting, where 49 people were senselessly murdered for being part of the LGBT community, and I think that it's a horrible thing that happened, and I think that the people that are part of this new independent fundamentalist Baptist that you often see in the news for calling for the systematic killing of the LGBT crowd, even so far as to praise like the shooter of the Pulse nightclub, I think that those people are disgusting, and they're basically a cult.
Gotcha.
Okay, I am not in that crowd that calls for the killing of them. God's mercy extends to everybody. I think it's pretty obvious these people don't reproduce babies, and that's the purpose of, we can get into another topic here. I taught biology. I'd give you a long lesson on that if you'd like. But I think it's tragic. Nobody should have gone into the nightclub and shot anybody. It's not our job to take the law into our hands. However, John, 3,500 babies were killed today by abortion. Are you against that too? If it's not
how you
what kind of being is it?
Biology, but then you call fetuses children.
So you don't think an unborn child is a child? Scott Peterson.
I think that a fetus is a fetus. It's not a child.
Okay, so it becomes a child at birth. So would it be okay to kill a baby 5 minutes before it's born, John?
Forgive me, guys, just to get to as many questions as possible. Okay. John, I know that you probably want to answer, John. I'm sorry if it's okay if I.
No, that's fine.
With that, so Ronald Madanka, thanks for your question. He said, is it possible that the flood story is a parable, just like the story of the prodigal son and many other stories in the Bible?
I assume that question's to me. There are no examples in parables in the Bible where names are given, proper names. And it's oftentimes real clear this is a story of parable. No, the Bible story, Jesus, or the story in the Bible about the flood gives all the names, gives all the details, tells where the ark landed on mountains of Ararat. It is not a parable in the biblical sense. I believe it's literally true and demonstrably correct historically and logically. But anyway, so no, my answer is definitely not a parable. Okay.
You bet. And thanks so much.
Oh, sorry. Can I say one thing real quick?
If it's, I hate to say no, just to get to as many questions as possible. Unless you feel like you just like have to say it, I can let it fly.
No, it's fine.
Okay, thanks for your patience. Avidia Nirvana, thanks for your super chat. They asked, to both, are you a materialist, a physicalist, or what? And thanks for your kind words, Avidia Nirvana. So, are you guys physicalists or materialists, or non-materialists of some type?
Well, I mean, I guess I would be a materialist because I don't think supernatural things are real.
I guess I'd have to have whoever asked the question define the terms more carefully, but I think it's pretty obvious there are things more than just material world. Where would you classify love or hatred or jealousy or envy or thinking? Where do thoughts exist? There's obviously things that are non-material in this world. You cannot give a material answer for what on earth is gravity. I can show you what it does. I can explain the acceleration due to gravity, 32 feet per second at sea level, or 9.8 meters per second at sea level. But that's not telling you what it is. I think it's obvious. If we are, John, if you believe you are just nothing but material matter, how can you trust your thoughts and the conclusion you come to? Because you think your brain evolved by chance over billions of years, nothing but a bunch of chemicals, just matter. Then you can't even trust your own thoughts and conclusions you reach.
Well,
I don't trust them either, by the way, but go ahead.
Well, what I would say is that gravity is what results when matter bends space-time. So just to point out how that's actually been we don't know everything about gravity, but I mean we know what causes gravity and so I mean we know a lot of things about gravity. But as far as how can I trust my own mind, I would say that there are some times when I don't trust my own mind. So I seek for things outside of myself to validate either how I feel or things that I know. And I think that it's in that uncertainty that I can come to the truth of reality.
Gotcha. Thanks so much, gentlemen. Marty Kemiho, thanks for your super chat. They asked, they had a statement, Erg, please tell Kent that machines won't evolve because they don't have genes. Why is that hard for him to understand? I think that one's for you, Kent.
I didn't understand all the verbiage there. Can you say that again clearly?
They said, please tell Kent that machines won't evolve because they don't have genes. Why is that hard for him to understand?
Oh, it's easy for me to understand. I use it as an illustration to show how stupid evolution is. If machines don't have genes, of course they don't, I understand that. But an animal that has gene code is trillions of times more complicated than any machine. They can understand that a machine can't evolve, but they'll think a living thing can evolve when it has gene code that is beyond any computer code ever written by man. Just the gene code in one cell is more complicated than all the computer codes ever written by man combined. That's in one single cell, and you got 100 trillion cells in your body. How can anybody study the genetic code of anything and believe it happened by chance? That is a special kind of stupid that there's no cure for.
So just to answer that really, really fast, so DNA and natural things that have natural explanations through natural processes are not all that, like, it's not all of that illogical to, come to the conclusion that natural processes cause these things. And we can obviously look at machines and different things that obviously people made that do not have natural processes to explain it. Came about by an intelligent mind or whatnot. But things that can be explained through natural processes do not need any kind of outside actor or sentient being in order to cause those things to happen.
Well, you're welcome to believe that. Yeah, I believe cars just happen by chance. Lightning strikes the iron mines, and cars come out from lightning striking the iron mine. I believe that.
I think. Forgive me. I hate to
way less dumb than your theory, John.
I hate to cut in, you guys. Given that the super chat was for Kent, I'll let him have the last word on that one, and then sorry to stop you, John, but to get to as many more as we can. Avadia Nirvana asked, what do each of you think about Alabama's awesome new castration law?
Castration.
Oh, castration. Okay, it applies to rapists and pedos. I don't know what it is. I'm like totally behind on apparently everything. What is there like some Alabama law about castrating people?
Yes. So recently, Alabama just signed into law a chemical castration law for rapists and pedophiles. Basically, if you are convicted of these crimes, you will be chemically castrated. Oh, for people under 13. Sorry, it's only It's only for people people that assault children under 13.
Wow. Okay.
This is the first time I've heard of that, but I like what I'm hearing so far. If somebody breaks into your house, John, and rapes your daughter, would you like something bad to happen to that person?
Most likely, if that were to happen, I would probably be the bad thing to happen to him.
There you go. Wonderful. We're on the same page on that one. Protect your daughter.
Well, no, actually, I did not agree that they should be chemically castrated or anything like that. I don't know a lot about it, so I'm going to abstain from actually giving my opinion because I haven't had enough time to actually consider it. So it's not that I think that rapists or pedophiles shouldn't be punished or anything like that. I'm just saying that in that particular law, I don't know exactly what's in it. I don't know what it calls for. I don't know what it can be used for. So I can't really espouse my position on it.
I've never heard of it until just now. I just said what I've heard so far I like. But I think chemical castration or physical castration or execution for certain crimes is logical in any culture, any place. And if someone wants to, a rapist or a pedophile, that seems to be the only language they speak. Explain it to them in a language they understand. Like, Louisville Slugger, most people speak that one. If somebody comes into your house to rape your daughter, get a Louisville Slugger and explain it to them. Don't do that. Okay?
Gotcha. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Next up, we have Waiki9. Thanks for your question. And they said for comment, for Kent, if mainstream geological models are bust, why do they meet with success in the free market when utilized by oil companies to make money?
I don't think geologic models have anything to do with drilling for oil. They know there's certain strata they're going to encounter because of a worldwide flood. You're going to go through layers of limestone and sandstone and shale and stuff like that. But I think if you went to North Korea, you would find all the textbooks are teaching communism works and capitalism's evil. And so all the kids are taught this all their life, and so they begin to believe it. And somebody comes along with evidence like, no, I don't think it doesn't work. Well, they put them out and, they execute them. And so I think America's gotten to the point in our education system where those who dare to stand up against the dumb evolution religion are ostracized. I don't think you can show me any evidence where the evolution theory has helped in the discovery of oil or the discovery of anything. It's not only a useless theory, it's dumb to believe that an amoeba can turn to a whale and a whale has a vestigial pelvis. That's not common sense. I'm sorry. Gotcha. But that is what our schools teach. And I can understand if John goes to school for years and years and learns all this stuff, he's probably going to believe it because that's what he's heard. A kid going to school in Korea for 30 years is going to believe communism works. A kid going to school in a Buddhist country is going to believe Buddhism works. It's a matter of brainwashing. It happens in every country and every culture. And so that's the only reason evolution is popular today, because of the intensive brainwashing for the last 100 years.
Kent, would you say that a Christian kid that was brought up in a Christian country that was taught nothing but creationism would, of course, believe that the Bible's true?
Absolutely correct. Now, but it's the same thing with evolution, though. Do you believe a kid ought to be able to see all sides and make a decision for himself? Should I be allowed to go speak in the public schools so they can make fun of me, John, like you do?
No. Creationism should not be taught in public schools. The topic of religion and theology is obviously not a subject that should be discussed with young children.
So, but it's okay to teach young children evolution, well, even though there's no evidence of any.
Yes, because evolution is a scientific concept that's been proven time and time again through lab experiments, as well as the fossil record, as well as various different things that you can point to in reality.
Well, I know you keep saying the phrase fossil record. John, there is no such thing as a fossil record. There are fossils, built trillions of them. I have thousands in my museum. There are fossils. That's not a question. It's not a record. These don't talk. They don't have a date on them. No date at all, anywhere.
Are you seriously using an equivocation fallacy to make fun of the fossil record?
I enjoy making fun of evolution in general. I have a blast.
I have a medical record. It is not a fucking vinyl. Sorry, I know, my bad. It is not a vinyl like Beatles album. Okay?
You're comparing your medical record to a fossil record. What a misuse.
You're comparing the fossil record to a Beatles album.
There is no fossil record, John. There are fossils. Trillions of them. There is no record.
Okay, next question.
It's your interpretation you're putting on it.
I think we will jump to the next question. Sorry, guys, just to try to keep moving through as many as possible. Candor Man.
Another drink of beer, that'll help. Okay.
Candor Man giving a little Joshin to Kent, says, why do you say water so strangely? So, just teasing. I don't know if you want to respond to that, Kent, you can. Is that the accent? Is it a southern accent or not?
No, I cannot explain to you how much fun I have making fun of those who believe they came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago. I really enjoy my job. Come down and see Dinosaur Adventureland.
You got it.
It's fun.
You know, I cannot get enough making fun of people that think that God farted the universe out and then sneezed on dirt and created a human.
We've got to go to the...
Who on earth believes that? I sure don't.
We got to go to the next. Got to go to the next question. Avadia Nirvana, thanks for your super chat. They said, don't forget to hit the like button. We appreciate that. If a couple of things to announce. One is that we will be doing, hopefully, we're shooting for this coming Sunday. We'll do a charity drive in which all super chat donations will be donated to, we think it's going to be the Diabetes Research Foundation. And so just want to mention that, as we think we're going to have an argument on the contingency argument for God's existence. And if another way you can help the channel, though, as Avadia Nirvana said, if you're not able to give to super chat, like, no problem, we're thrilled just to have you here. Just by watching, you're supporting the channel. And another thing is, indeed, hitting the like button actually does help. That basically gives YouTube feedback. Basically, user engagement shows that people are enjoying the video. So please do hit like if you enjoyed it. Sentinel Apologetics, thanks for your question. They said, Kent, in Psalm 104:9, David writes that once dry land appears in creation day 3, the ocean, quote unquote, will never again cover the earth. Noah's flood occurs after creation. If it's global, it contradicts David.
Well, that's certainly a misunderstanding of what it's saying. Psalm 103 is referring to, or Psalm 104, after the flood. God himself promised Noah, he put a rainbow in the sky. It's never going to flood the world again. He's going to destroy it next time by fire, but it'll never be flooded again. That's what God's... So I don't know where they get... I've never heard that. Anybody in the world has ever said that one. And I get critics from all over come after our channel, Kent Hovind official. So no, it's not at all what that verse says, that God didn't promise the world would never be flooded at creation. He promised that to Noah after the flood, about 1,600 years later, when God flooded the world, got off. That's why we have a rainbow. It's probably not possible to have a rainbow under high pressure, because you have to have clouds to get a rainbow. And if the earth had a canopy of water above, like I believe it clearly teaches in Genesis 1, 6, and 7, high pressure worldwide would be clear skies and extra air pressure, extra oxygen to breathe. You live a long time and feel wonderful most of the time. So watch my video number 2. So
Gotcha.
The rainbow indicate that was part of the promise of never going to flood again.
Next.
And not.
Next up,
Go ahead.
Sorry to rush you. Let's see. So Ronald Madanka, thanks for your super chat. He said, keeping with my last question, what method do you use to discern between a parable and history in the Bible? I think that's for Kent.
Well, the parables, as I said, do not have any proper names in any of them I'm aware of. There are many parables in the Bible. People use Aesop's fables. This is a common teaching method all through history to teach. I do it around here. I show people a fallen tree and say, why did this fall? It didn't have any deep roots. It had shallow roots. The wind blew it over. And so I use dozens or maybe even 100 of them here in the tour. It's a common teaching method to use an illustration or a parable or a story. Aesop's fables is an example. The Bible has many of them, but if there's a proper name involved in it, I know of no cases where that's a parable.
You got it? Thanks
Like
so much.
Jesus told about the rich man and Lazarus, who rich man went to hell and could lift up his eyes and see Lazarus and talk to him and hear him and have a conversation. That's not a parable. It's a real place. John, I don't want you to go there. But if you want to go, go ahead. Okay.
We got
What I would say, just to piggyback on that, is that if you look up John Dominic Crossan's Power of Parable, he lays out a very good case for the entire New Testament, especially the Gospels, being a mega parable. And he lays out how it actually matches parable mechanics and everything like that. That is a very good book to read up on if you're interested in parables and the Bible.
Next up, thanks so much. We have Jonathan Brown asks, Kent, what do you do with the Old Testament flat earth verses?
I don't know of any Old Testament flat earth verses. I'd like to see those. I've read the Bible many times, been a Christian 50 years. I think the flat earth theory is not the dumbest. Evolution is definitely dumber, but flat earth is pretty dumb, right up there, getting close to it. The earth is not flat. It's round. It's a ball. It's about 8,000 miles in diameter. Okay.
Well, if I could bring it up, I don't know the exact verse, but there's at one point Jesus is brought up to a point that's high enough to where he can see all four corners of the earth. So, what's your explanation for that one?
I can get on my computer and see things happening in China and Japan right now. I can see every part of the globe that there's internet access right now from sitting here in Lenox, Alabama. So if Satan could take Jesus up on a high mountain and show him all the kingdoms of the world, that doesn't prove the earth is flat. I can see all the kingdoms of the world sitting in Lenox, Alabama.
Can I, let me ask one last question, then we'll move on to the next one. Did Satan have like that AOL with the CD in it, or what kind of internet did Satan have at that time?
I'm not sure if I don't know what kind of laptop he had either. It might have been a Mac or an IBM. I'm not sure, but
yeah, it's probably a Mac. He seems like a
when you go to hell, you can ask him, John. Okay.
Next up, we've got another one from Avadia Nirvana. Thanks for your super chat. And they said, to Kent, is quote-unquote beer a bad word?
Deer as in like the deer that run around the woods?
Beer as in like alcohol.
Is beer a bad word? No, it's a word to describe alcohol. I mean, there's depending on the alcoholic content. I've never tasted any. I've seen it wreck a lot of lives, though. Gee whiz. No, I've never tasted it.
Beer is awesome, especially in these situations.
Especially in these situations. John, are you getting nervous? Come on now. Is your religion being attacked?
No, because I don't have a religion, so it's not. You can't attack something that's not. It'd be like me slapping a leprechaun.
Okay.
We've got Avadia Nirvana. Thanks for your other question. They said, to Kent, have you heard of Jesse Lee Peterson? If so, what do you think of Jesse Lee Peterson?
Never heard of Jesse Lee Peterson. Don't know anything about him. Who is it?
He's a controversial pastor online. We've requested to have him on, but we haven't heard back. But he's a character, so I don't know what else to say. So
sorry, never heard of him. Don't know anything about him.
Thanks for that question. And then Anon Y Mouse, thanks for your question in super chat. He said, does Kent understand the difference between petrification and permineralization? Fossilization is the latter, not the former, as defined by the scientific literature, and that takes more than a few days to weeks in nature.
I think I clearly understand the difference. As I mentioned when you asked the question, I think there are several different types of the way fossils can be formed. There's replacement fossils, there's mineralization, permineralization, there's, I got to go back and look up all the different kinds, but sure, it happens different ways, but it can happen rapidly. The fact that you have fossilized soft tissue indicates it did not take millions of years. It couldn't take more than a few hours or days in some cases. Fossilization can happen rapidly. That's my point. I show examples in my seminar number 6. Watch the Hovind theory, and I cover that on there. Well, yeah, marriage has nothing to do with having babies. I mean, it often produces babies and should, but no, yeah, of course, I don't understand that question at all. About 20% of the population now cannot have babies, is what I've heard. Well, I guess it depends on how you define marriage. I think all through history in every country in the world, it's been defined as a man and a woman. And if you want to be like, who's the guy who says there's 57 genders? He needs to have a long talk with his mama. I think, from my knowledge, there's only 2 that I've ever seen. So, okay. I don't think there's any such thing as Pangea. People say, do you think the continents were ever connected? And I say, what are you talking about? They're still connected right now. If you got a long pair of stilts, you could walk from America to Africa because the ocean has a bottom to it called the ocean floor. They're still connected. The whole world is connected right now. The low places are full of water. That's all. Doesn't mean, what do you mean, were they connected? They'll take the shape of the continent, say Africa looks like it might fit South America. Well, my house and the neighbor's house would fit too if you slid them together. What does that prove? Doesn't prove nothing. I think that Pangea is a really extremely stupid theory. Okay, but go ahead. I do think the continents are sliding around and moving a little bit. That could be the result of Noah's flood and the cracks of the earth opening up. And the earth has fault lines all over the place. Just the mid-Atlantic ridge, I think, is 47,000 miles, goes clear around the earth like a zipper and spreads out a couple places. And yeah, the earth is busted up, and some of the plates are still moving. But Pangea is a really dumb theory.
So Pangea is not actually a really dumb theory because we find fossils in different parts of the globe where we wouldn't expect the fossils to be found, and that only makes sense if Pangea was an actual supercontinent in the past. There's nothing to support his whole idea that water, a half a mile thick water thing below the earth of the crust was before the crust of the earth is actually a thing. There's no evidence to support that whole idea. And so I will touch on the whole the squid fossil thing. I actually just looked it up, and it's not actually the soft tissue that's fossilized. It's the harder parts of the cephalopod that would have been fossilized, like the shells that they often inhabited, and they would be squid-like creatures. So you're not actually correct in the fact that a squid fossil of soft tissue was found.
I think you need to do some more research. They have found fossilized octopus, fossilized starfish.
This is from the University of Kentucky Geological Survey website. So it's an actual university with actual scientific information.
Got to be true if it comes from Kentucky.
Next up, we thank you for your patience, everybody. This is the worst I've ever done at muting myself and then not unmuting. So the questions that I had read is I said, basically, the one about Kent, I'm married and can't have babies, is my marriage valid? That was one that I had asked. And then hopefully everybody heard the one about petrification, permineralization. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, it's been a long day. Sigifredo Sarabia, thanks for your question. And we got to, question intake is closed. I'm really sorry, we got to try to wrap up. Basically, they had said, I asked the question about Pangea, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Brian Stevens asked, has Kent ever seen a genetic algorithm which is based on biological evolution? It shows how randomness can achieve a goal-based fitness.
Have I ever seen a genetic algorithm based on evolution? I guess I don't understand the question completely. I think certainly people make up all kinds of stories about the genetics and similar DNAs and try to think that maybe proves something to somebody somewhere. But genetic algorithm that proves evolution? I think you can make up any stories you'd like about genetics and say that, because you could take English sentences, sentences made out of English words and compare and see how many letters are similar and say, wow, this sentence has 98% similarity to this sentence with the letter structure. It doesn't prove any relationship. What they're doing, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. That sentence contains every letter of the English alphabet. What if I said the quick brown fox does not jump over the lazy dog? I probably have, 90% similarity, but it has a different meaning. So if there are differences in the DNA codes of different animals, like they say humans and chimps are 98% similar, which they're not. They're less than 91% now, the more they dig into it. But even if there's a 1% difference, again, it doesn't prove a similarity in ancestry. It proves a similar designer. The same guy designed them. That's all. Anyway, so have him fine-tune the question a little bit and try it again.
And I would say special pleading, but go ahead to the next question.
Next one. Thanks for your patience. Science enthusiast, getting to the last ones here. They had said, is Kent aware that George McCready did it first? I'm not sure what you're referring to when you say he did it first. Do you guys know what that might be referring to?
I have heard of George McCready. I don't know much about him. Apparently he was someone who taught creation years ago, and they try to say he did it first. I think God actually did it first, and then Adam would have done it to his kids, and everybody would have talked about creation for a long time, until somebody just a couple hundred years ago decided to come up with the dumb idea of evolution. But no, George McCready did not start teaching creation first. A lot of people have taught that, and taught the earth is 6,000 years old. That's common teaching all throughout history. Well, at least the earth is not millions of years old. It was just in the last 200 years this dumb religion came along that says, oh, it's billions of years old. It's just not true.
Gotcha. Next up, Tommy Fuller asked, Kent, what makes evolution a religion?
Well, you have to believe in it. You have to accept it by faith. There's no evidence for it. No farmer in the history of the world has ever seen a dog produce a non-dog or a cow produce a non-cow. They believe it happened. They've got lines on paper connecting them, but there's zero scientific evidence that it even can happen. Certainly there's no evidence it has happened. Ask any farmer of anything, whether it's plants or animals, corn or cows. Cows produce cows without exception. Dogs produce dogs without exception. There is zero evidence of this evolution theory that they're teaching our kids. It is a religion you have to believe in. They believe in it completely without scientific evidence. There is no scientific evidence. No fossil could possibly count as evidence in a court of law. You find a bone in the dirt, all you know is it died. You can't prove it had any kids, and you sure can't prove it had different kids. And why don't animals today produce different kids? If that one in the past could do it, well, why can't they do it today? How come cows always make cows today and dogs always make dogs? There are no exceptions. You may believe in it. You may believe in it very strongly. I'm sure the Buddhists believe very strongly in their religion, and the Catholics believe very strongly, and the communists believe very strongly. It doesn't make it true. And they might even find a lot of people who believe in it. Majority opinion doesn't matter. Even if everybody believes something, that doesn't make it true. There's, 1.3 million or billion Muslims who believe that Muhammad was a prophet, and he split the moon in half. That doesn't make it true.
What I'll say is that while dogs do not produce non-dogs because of I can't remember the technical, the scientific term right now. Dogs, of course, will always produce dogs, but they exist within the same species. So, it will produce a different kind of canine eventually. Like eventually down the line, it'll change and it'll be unrecognizable as a dog given whatever environment that it's in. So I just feel like this entire rant that you just went on shows exactly how you don't understand what evolution actually is.
Oh, I think I clearly understand it, and you see that I understand it, and you called it a rant because you're getting embarrassed because your religion's being exposed. That's okay though. Dogs produce dogs. Now, John, hold on one thing. You said dogs will always produce dogs. Did a dog come from something that was non-dog billions of years ago? Is an amoeba a dog? Is a single-celled creature a dog?
Do you know what a dog is? Tell me what the species of a dog is, like domesticated dog.
Well, there's Canis lupus, Canis domesticus, Canis coyotes. There's 4 or 5 different ones we put in the same family.
Yes,
the animals.
The Cladus canine, right?
Sure. Okay. Is an amoeba a dog?
No, because an amoeba exists separate than that particular clade. Look, you don't know what evolution is. Can we please move on to the next?
Oh, I know clearly what it is, and it's stupid.
No, you don't.
Yeah, it's real stupid. But go ahead,
James. Can we move on to the next question?
This is the last super chat. Let's see. Marty Camijo says Kent makes me thank the goddess that I'm pagan. My guess is that's for you, Kent.
Well, I don't understand that one. They want me to thank their goddess that they're pagan?
Oh, they said Kent makes me thank the goddess that I'm pagan. So I think they're a polytheist.
You can believe whatever you want. I don't care what you believe. I believe there's going to be a judgment one day, and you're going to wish you had a savior, but if you don't want it, okay. The Bible says in the last days the scoffers will be willingly ignorant of the creation, the flood, and the coming judgment. They don't want to admit there was a creation. They don't want to admit the evidence for a flood, this debate tonight, and they sure don't want to admit there's a coming judgment. Okay, I'll see you at the throne. You'll be there. And every knee shall bow, and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Coming soon to a city near you, John. Go ahead.
Next up, Sentinel Apologetics. Tommy Fuller and Sentinel, these are the last ones. Tommy Fuller says, Kent, doesn't your Bible say man came from dirt?
Absolutely. God took dust of the ground and made man. General Motors takes metal out of the ground and makes cars.
Gotcha. We're glad.
To say God can take dust and make man is very different than saying dust can make man by itself, which is what John believes.
Gotcha.
Very different.
Let's see. The last one, Sentinel Apologetics, thanks for your question. He said, Kent, Psalm 104 is not about the flood, but a paraphrase of Genesis 1. All ancient Near Eastern scholars see it as a polemic against the Egyptian Aten creation hymn.
Tell him to give me a call. I'll straighten him out.
Gotcha. We appreciate everybody being here. So I want to say we can't take any more questions. I'm really sorry about that. We went overtime. But with that, I want to say thanks for being here. We appreciate everybody. Hey everybody, today we are debating creation versus evolution, and we are starting right now. Hey everybody, stoked to have you here for this special debate. This is going to be a great time. Whew, I'm excited. My heart is beating right now because I'm so pumped up. My goal in this whole channel of the goal of the channel is I was just telling Godless Engineer, we want people to feel welcome. So if you are a Christian, atheist, Muslim, postmodernist, whatever you are, we're glad you're here, and we'd love to get to see you again. If you enjoy this content, feel free to consider hitting that subscribe button. We're excited you just saw a trailer for a debate with Dr. Michael Brown and Digital Hammurabi coming up. So very excited for that. But am I as excited as I am right now for this debate right now? What could beat it? So I want to let you guys know the links are down in the description. If you're like, man, this is really interesting. I've never thought of that before. I want to check his stuff out. Well, it's conveniently right down there in the description box, so you can click on their link and see their channel. Or maybe you're like, that's standing for truth, I can't take it. Well, you can go click on that link, troll him all you want at his channel. So with that, just want to give the speakers a chance to kind of share what they've been up to at their channel. Just give you a little taste, so like maybe just a couple sentences about things that they're excited about at their channel. And then we will jump right into the format I'll explain for the debate, and then we'll get right into the discussion. So with that, Godless Engineer, first time here, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate you spending your time with us. If you want to share what you've been up to at your channel, we're all ears.
Yeah, so, over on my channel, I do atheist-related content as well as science-related content. A lot of that's kind of based on the flat Earth discussion and responding to those. But we also do like evolution kind of content and just atheist related, like the religion topic sort of content, where I do response videos, and we even have a Bible podcast where we're reading through the Bible front to back right now. So we do all that. We also have memberships over there. We got the Skeptic Mafia and everything. So it's a really great time over there on the GE channel.
You bet. Well, we're glad you're here, and I can tell you, just from watching some of Godless Engineer's content, he's got a good sense of humor. I think, hopefully, I'm confident we'll see it tonight. He is self-effacing kind of guy. So, also, Standing for Truth, thank you for coming. We really appreciate you being here, spending your time with us. If you want to share what you've been up to at your channel, we are all ears.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me again, James. It's always a pleasure. I'm sure the audience is getting bored hearing all about my channel. I think this is maybe my 10th time on here, but just the usual stuff, lots of discussions, videos, primarily debunking atheism, evolutionism, debates. Got a couple debates coming up. The closest one next week is going to be Ken Hovind versus Jim Majors on evidence for biblical creation, and a couple more fun ones at the end of the month. So I'm pretty excited. I think this is going to be a a really wild month. So once again, thanks so much, Godless Engineer, for participating in the debate. And thanks again, James.
Yeah, you bet. Well, stoked to jump right into this. So here we go. This is the format. 10-minute openings, then 5-minute rebuttals, a 25-minute discussion section, and then 4-minute closings, followed by 25 minutes of Q&A. And I'm going to try to move so fast through the Q&A, sometimes I don't get to all the questions. And I promised the debaters we would respect their time by ending it at 25 minutes. So we will fly through that, or I will fly through that in reading the questions. So with that, given that I just realized we hadn't, given that it's creation versus evolution, we hadn't discussed, I'm embarrassed that I hadn't asked you guys who wants to go first. If you guys have a preference, it's really ultimately I want it to be up to you guys. Do you guys have a preference on who goes first?
I do not.
Doesn't matter. I can certainly go first. Doesn't matter to me, James.
You got it. Okay.
That's
then,
easier, more convenient. I don't mind.
Then we will, standing for truth, if you're happy with it, we will have you go first. And I am starting the clock for 10 minutes, and or setting the clock for 10 minutes. I will start it on your first word.
Awesome. Well, I'll just share my screen here real quick, James.
You bet.
Let's get these out of the way and we should be good. All right, you can see everything good?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's get this party started. Been looking forward to this, so this should be fun. Tonight, biblical creation versus evolutionism. Creation, Adam and Eve, the fall, and evidence. We constantly hear that there's no evidence for biblical creation and that evolutionary theory best explains our origins. For example, this quote from Frank Zindler from a debate with William Lane Craig, I believe it was, perfectly sums up the importance of defending biblical creation. What he said was, the most devastating thing, though, that biology did to Christianity was the discovery of biological evolution. Now that we know that Adam and Eve never were real people, the central myth of Christianity is destroyed. If there never was an Adam and Eve, there never was an original sin. If there never was an original sin, there is no need of salvation. If there is no need of salvation, there is no need of a savior. And I submit that puts Jesus, historical or otherwise, into the ranks of the unemployed. I think that evolution is absolutely the death knell of Christianity. A literal Genesis. Is this really true, this quote? Is there no evidence for biblical creation, Adam and Eve, and a literal Genesis? Genetic evidences for Genesis. There are 3 main events in Scripture, in Genesis to be specific, that we can address with modern genetics. The events are the creation of Adam and Eve, the flood of Noah, and the Tower of Babel. The Bible tells us that it's the history book of the universe. Starting with this as a basic assumption, we can test the Bible to scientific discoveries and see how well this fits. The Bible tells us that Adam is the father of all people. Genesis 2:7 says, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. We see no evolutionary history of mankind here. There is not even a hint at fish to fisherman, bacteria to biologists, evolution in this verse. According to the Bible, we were made perfect and in the image of God. Genesis 2:21-22 says, and the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam. And he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man made he a woman and brought her unto the man. We started with 2 people, 1 man and 1 woman. And these are very significant statements about genetics. Genesis 9:18-19, we read, and the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. These are the 3 sons of Noah, and of them was the whole earth overspread. Like I said, the Bible tells us that it's the history book of the universe. Evidence here that refutes evolutionism and confirms the Bible. All human beings are profoundly similar genetically, and this points directly to Adam and Eve. If you only started with 2 people, that restricts the diversity today. Over deep time, it's obvious that any large population will most certainly accumulate enormous numbers of mutations, resulting in enormous amounts of genetic diversity. This is a serious problem for evolutionary theory because it is now clear that mankind has very limited genetic variation. While the observed low genetic diversity is a massive problem from the evolutionary perspective, this is most certainly expected and predicted from the biblical perspective. The Bible predicted this thousands of years ago. From the biblical base model, we all come from just 2 people, obviously, Adam and Eve, as we've read in the passages before in the previous slides. This obviously means that limited diversity is easy to explain. Like I said, the Bible predicted this. This means the death and demise of the evolutionary bottleneck theory and the evolutionary out of Africa theory. It is now clear and evident that there exists a singular female ancestor of all humans, which is referred to as mitochondrial Eve, and her basic DNA sequence is easily discernible and detected in humans alive today. And it is not more similar to a chimpanzee, contrary to what the evolutionists would have you believe. There is also clearly and evidently a singular male ancestor of all humans alive today, referred to and known as Y chromosome Adam. His DNA sequence is largely known, and contrary to what evolutionists believe, it is not at all similar to that of chimpanzees. Look at Noah's flood. What does this tell us? This story tells us that all people should be closely related. It tells us there should only be a few mitochondrial DNA lines as Shem, Ham, and Japheth's wives, and only one Y chromosome since it's only Noah. His 3 sons would have inherited his Y chromosome. And we should have significant evidence of rapid population growth. It turns out that this too is exactly what we find in modern genetics. This all did not have to be true. More predictions. The Tower of Babel account. We have found a single dispersal of all people in a relatively recent past, traveling in small people groups into uninhabited territory through the Middle East. They call it the out of Africa story, but these are all biblical-based predictions. Icing on the cake for biblical creation, more and more evidence. I can go on all day. Humans are fundamentally different from all other forms of life when we consider genomics and functionality. We see that genetic change is actually down and not up. We are therefore devolving due to mutation accumulation. Information in our genomes cannot arise via mutation and natural selection, as we now know that there exist multiple overlapping codes in our DNA. All you have to do is picture. Just imagine receiving an email and finding that it has 3 totally different messages, where you get one message when you read it normally, one evident message when read in reverse, and one when reading every other letter. This indicates data compression at the highest level, which extends far beyond any computer program ever written by man. And we're just beginning to understand the DNA language. The junk DNA era has been completely overturned and is no longer a valid form of evidence for evolutionists. Molecular clocks and other dating methods most consistently point to a young genome. There's actually plenty of evidence that man and dinosaurs coexisted, and there's also evidence that the Earth was once underwater. Quick detour, time to be a big boy now, guys. Now that we've seen just some of the evidence for biblical creation, it's time for evolutionists to grow up and quit believing in fairy tales. There never was a man named Peter Parker who was bit by a radioactive spider, giving him spider-like abilities. The original Spider-Man trilogy with Tobey Maguire swinging from building to building with his spider webs was a great trilogy and all, but it's just not true. You've been lied to. It's time to start believing the truth. Yes, there is evidence for biblical creation, and no, absolutely not. There is no evidence for pond scum to people and goo to you evolution. Devolution is what we observe. Evolution is not. This is what we expect given a biblical-based model. How much more time do I have, James?
You got 2 minutes and 45 seconds.
Beautiful. Michael Behe said in his book, Darwin Devolves, and it flows perfectly, Darwinian evolution proceeds mainly by damaging or breaking genes, which counterintuitively sometimes help survival. In other words, the mechanism is powerfully devolutionary. It promotes the rapid loss of genetic information. Laboratory experiments, field research, and theoretical studies all forcefully indicate that. As a result, random mutation and natural selection make evolution self-limiting. Darwin's mechanism works chiefly by squandering genetic information for short-term gain. Pond scum to people evolution is pure imagination. It's science to say that dogs produce dogs. It's not science. It's not empirical science to say that dogs, pine trees, bacteria, and whales are related. Evolutionists imagine that mutations make something new and better. Incremental changes is what they say. Evolutionists imagine that all these small-scale variations will eventually add up to make something we don't actually observe. Time, as I've always said, is the hero of the story for the evolutionists. Evolutionists are confused. They confuse adaptation to environments and evolution of higher life forms as if they were the same thing. Evolutionists, as I've said, they're confused. It doesn't take a genius to see that these are different issues. Adaptation can routinely be accomplished by loss of information, but the development of higher life forms always requires a large increase in net information. We're all actually mutant. We can see that genomes are devolving and the genome is rusting out like a car. Things are going down and not up. All modern scientific evidence points to the decay and destruction of an originally perfect design and creation. As I've said, empirical evidence suggests that everything, including all life, is subject to entropic decay. We observe devolution and not evolution. These near neutral, low impact, deleterious mutations, they're degenerating our information systems. Looking backward, the sad reality of this genetic degeneration demands a literal Adam, a literal Eve, and a literal fall. Just look at the decline in ages at death. We can actually see that the lifespan as recorded in Genesis strongly supports the historicity and truth of the Bible, and in particular, the book of Genesis. There's more and more evidence I could go through, but for now, that should be more than enough to give the fatal blow to evolutionary theory. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for that opening statement from Standing for Truth. We'll switch back over to the dialogue boxes, and I will set the timer for 10 minutes. And Godless Engineer, I will start the clock on your first word.
All right. Well, thank you, James, for having me here on Modern Day Debate. I really appreciate the chance to, I guess, defend evolution in this particular discussion. I also appreciate Standing for Truth for making the time to come here and debate me about it. Now, so my initial talk here is not going to be in rebuttal to Standing for Truth. Obviously, I was taking notes, but just keep in mind that none of this is meant to refute anything that he said directly. So I'm just going to kind of go through my notes and what I've written down. So one of the best things about any scientific theory is its ability to make predictions. And so if evolution is true, it's predicted that we should find evidence for evolution in a lot of different avenues. Today I'm going to try to go over biological evidence, fossil evidence, and direct observation. And just to note, it doesn't, like one particular piece of evidence or one particular avenue that you go down is not going to refute evolution outright. That's a ridiculous claim for anybody to make, that one single piece of evidence would totally topple all of evolution. So first, let's go through the biological evidence. We should see evidence for evolution in genetics in various ways. The driving force behind this is mutation of genes over generations of organisms. We have directly observed increased genetic variety in a population, increased genetic material, novel genetic material, and novel genetically regulated abilities. Mutations being the driving force of evolution is undeniably proven by modern science. Most of these mutations that occur are neutral. Some are harmful, but those are prevented from propagating throughout the species or the population. And it prevents them from passing it on. And then the good mutations that happen, those allow the organism to survive better in the environment that it's in. So that's about good mutations, bad and neutral ones. Now, there's also a thing called epigenetics, which plays a big role in evolution. In fact, epigenetics only makes sense with respect to evolution. Epigenetics plays into the adaptation that you see, and we can go over that in a little bit more detail if we want to later on in the discussion, but since it wasn't a primary thing in Standing for Truth's opening, I'll reserve that for later. Now, evolution takes a long time to occur. I know it was brought up in Standing's initial thing that time is very important to evolution, and it is, because all of these changes take place over millions of years, and it takes a long time for one animal or one organism to change into a completely different animal or organism. in order for the flood story to make sense, the animals on the ark would have to produce about 11 new species every single day. I mean, that is literally a cat pooping out a completely different animal, and other animals just creating new versions of themselves immediately on first birth, I guess. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So, as far as the biological evidence goes, one big question that I have for Standing for Truth is, what do you mean by like a loss of specificity or a loss of information when it comes to genes? And also, what does genetic degradation actually look like? Because I'm really confused by those concepts, and it seems like you don't really have a very well-defined idea of what that actually means. Now, to go on to fossil evidence, there's a lot of fossil evidence for evolution. Our fossil record clearly shows an indication of different species temporally following each other through time. As mentioned before, we know whales, I mentioned that in my epigenetics talk thing, but whales evolved from quadruped ancestors that were land animals. And we know this because of the vestigial limbs that we find in both whales and dolphins. Now, evolution has also predicted that the fossil record would show different organisms living at different times. The geologic column is a perfect example of this. The geologic column is a product of uniformitarianism. Uniformitarianism means that changes in the Earth's crust during our geological history have resulted from the action of continuous and uniform processes. This is how we actually observe everything to operate in reality for as long as we've been taking notice. But this results in fossils of animals appearing in specific layers of Earth that correlates to the time frame they lived in. And it seems reasonable enough, right? Uniformitarianism is the only viable explanation for why fossils are found where they are found. Considering the other explanation is that during a worldwide flood, multiple different layers of rock were laid down neatly on top of each other, and then each layer only contained certain types of animals. I feel like it's more probable that uniformitarianism and the geologic column being laid down over time is the actual situation. Using evolutionary theory and the geologic column, there have been numerous fossils that were predicted to be found and were subsequently found, like the transitional fossil between teethed and baleen whales. Tiktaalik's fossil was found in the same manner. They predicted where and approximately what layer of the Earth it should appear in, and they were able to find those fossils. Now, we also have direct observation, which evolutionary theory has a lot to predict. Now, in 2016, there was an experiment on bacteria by the Harvard Medical School that shows bacteria adapting to higher and higher concentrations of antibiotics. Now, evolutionary theory also predicts that flightless island birds descend from the nearest land-dwelling bird species, and that every island would have a species of flightless bird that is specific to that island. And this has found out to be true. Evolutionary theory has also predicted a number of different transitional fossils that were later found. We have also been able to predict specific traits that exist in these transitional fossils. And so how much time do I have, James?
You got 3 minutes exactly.
3 minutes. So if I can use this last few minutes to kind of go over, my whole point of this intro right here was to prove that evolution provides a predictable model that allows us to actually see things in reality, or to find things, or what to expect out of reality. And the reality of the situation is that evolution is true, and it does happen. The bacteria experiment proves that. Now, I would like to say that the use of evolutionism to make it some kind of like ism or ideology, I think, is quite disingenuous on Standing for Truth's part. Evolution doesn't ever try to talk about origins, like abiogenesis or anything like that. Evolution is just the change in a population of organisms over time, and that results in different species and just the diversity of life that we see. He also said that if there was never an Adam and Eve, that Christianity would be destroyed. I disagree with that. There's a majority of Christians today that don't consider Adam and Eve to be a historical people, and yet their faith is still intact and Christianity is just fine. I think that you can take those as metaphorical and just be fine with it. He also said that the Bible is a history book of the universe. I would like to really disagree with that, considering that the fact that the Bible says that God spoke everything into existence, or he just turned a light on, or anything like that, when we actually know that after the Big Bang occurred, it was a few 100,000 years after that when the first light actually started. So it seems to me like it's not actually a history book of the universe. That's on top of all the other problems that I have with Genesis and the Bible in general. Most of Standing for Truth's front end of his argument was just for the Bible tells me so, and I'll end with this: that if God did in fact make all of us and everything like that, then he laid down all of the evidence to point us in the direction of evolution. So that would make Standing for Truth's whole position a unfalsifiable narrative, meaning that you can't falsify anything he says because he's always got an excuse for why it's that way, and his excuse is God did it. And you can't come to truth by just saying God did it and explain it away like that. So I believe I'll end there.
You bet. Thanks so much. And next up, for the rebuttal phase, I have set the clock for 5 minutes. So, Standing for Truth, when you are ready, I will click start on your first word.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much there for your...
Forgive me. I just wanted to mention to the chat, I forgot to mention at the start, if you have a question for the Q&A, if you put @ModernDayDebate in the live chat and then let us know which debater, or if it's for both debaters, that helps us, as we will then compile it into a list and ask as many as we can during the question and answer session at the end. And then, super chats. If you have a super chat, it also allows you to make a short comment towards one of the speakers to which they can give a response to. And then secondly, all of the super chats automatically go to the top of the list during the debate or during the Q&A. So with that, thanks for your patience. I will give you your full 5 minutes, Standing for Truth. I didn't mean to cut in on you. So on your first word, I will start the timer for 5 minutes.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for that opening there, Godless Engineer. So I'll get right into it. It sounds like deep time is his rescuing device. That's kind of what I gathered from that opening. The more time we give Ponscum to evolution, Ponscum to people evolution to work its wonders, the more organisms become extinct. You know, time is not the hero of the plot for the evolutionists, as they'd like you to believe. It's actually... it's actually the enemy. And he talked about epigenetics, but epigenetics doesn't actually add new novel information in any way, shape, or form. It's just basic adaptation, and that's really it. You know, no new novel and meaningful information is gained. Only a gene is expressed, a pre-existing gene, of course. So I'd have to ask him to name, a single beneficial mutation, say in man, that's not somewhat deleterious, because for the most part, the ones he could point to, they're really just based on an epigenetic tag, and they're not actually beneficial mutations. When it comes to his species argument about 11 species per day, that's actually wrong, because number one, we only started to document these speciation events the last century, and we can go deep into the created heterozygosity hypothesis and talk about the speciation, what makes more sense of the origin of species, either the creation model or the evolutionary model in our discussion period. But the fact that we've just begun to document these speciation events, we actually don't know the real speciation events, and we've actually made testable predictions based on this model that we can get into, that we actually look to genome functionality. Faster mutation rates, for example, in the past, due to the bad environmental conditions of post-flood, would lead to rapid speciation hundreds of years after the flood. But in short, most species today already formed in the past. So the 11 species per year is not really an argument at all. And like I said, we look to the created heterozygosity hypothesis. God encoded these pre-existing functional DNA differences into the created kinds, into Adam and Eve, and through processes such as gene conversion, recombination, that could lead to new species quick. And like I said, he talked about testable predictions, and of course the gold standard of science is making these testable and falsifiable predictions. And we've made it on mutation rates, we've made it on DNA function. So I'm sure we can actually talk about that. We're past the whole God did it thing because of the many testable and falsifiable predictions that we've made. For example, the tree that I always show that Dr. Nathaniel Jensen has derived based on mitochondrial DNA that points right back to Noah's 3 daughters-in-law makes testable predictions on the stamp of civilization. So we can also talk about that. Another thing I got written down here was his fossils and Tiktaalik and whales, for example. I mean, fossils are just circumstantial evidence that actually requires a theory to account for it. And when it comes to the information loss, we can look at, shifts from heterozygosity to homozygosity. We can look at the fact that we accumulate 100 new mutations per person per generation. We can look at deletions. There's many different ways that we can actually calculate the information lot in a species. And he talked about how mutations, a lot of them, they're not harmful, they're neutral, but that would misunderstand the entire point of, for one, genetic entropy, and two, neutral mutations in general. Because yes, most mutations are neutral from the perspective of the organism's physical fitness, right, the phenotype, of course, but all mutations must have effect on the genetic content, which is the genotype. So in no way are mutations truly neutral. All must have an effect on the genotype.
49 seconds.
So 49 seconds. So if you look at Tiktaalik, the claimed tetrapod traits, they're consistent with many living and extinct lobe-finned fish species today. And with the recent discovery of the Poland tetrapod tracks that actually predates Tiktaalik by nearly 20 million years, the evidence couldn't be any more clear. Tiktaalik is a bottom-dwelling lobe-finned fish. It's not actually a missing link to land animals. It's also important that creationists also predict and expect nested hierarchies. They expect mosaic creatures like Tiktaalik, like platypus, for example, and whales, the presumed transitional forms he talks about, Pakicetus, Ambulocetus, Rhodocetus, they're highly questionable.
6 seconds.
The claim that these are all whale precursors is actually based more on speculation,
Time.
storytelling, and wishful thinking. Thanks,
Time.
James.
Thank you very much, Standing for Truth. We will now kick it over to Godless Engineer. I have the clock set, and I will start it on your first word.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of work backward up from his last rebuttal right here, from what I got written down. He mentions about the footsteps or whatnot predating Tiktaalik. That actually wasn't my point in bringing up Tiktaalik as to point to the bridge between sea life and land animals. My point was that evolution, it has a predictable model, and using the evolutionary model, they were able to predict where to find it and at what layer. So that validates evolution as being a good scientific theory for explaining like the diversity of life, because we are able to predict things using it. So that was the point in that. He said that there's no neutral mutations really, that it's all really deleterious or whatever. That's actually not true. I would say that any mutation that's neutral would be one that has no bearing on the fitness of that particular organism or that particular species. And there are scientific studies that have been done that show these neutral mutations and how they're mostly neutral. All of the mutations, the 100 that he talks about per generation, most of them are neutral. There are some that are bad, but those don't get carried throughout the organism. The good mutations that are shown are carried throughout it. Like, he wants an example of this, and I would say that our vision in general is a good way to know that these good mutations do happen. because most mammals have poor vision. And so us having the color vision that we do and everything like that, that's actually a genetic mutation that happened in our particular lineage. There's a lot of other things like lactose tolerancy, our ability to drink milk and milk products. That was a mutation. Another thing is the color of your eye and stuff like that. So there are good mutations that have helped us in one way or another, or just exist. Like, for instance, the color of the eye. I would say that those are probably mostly neutral, especially now, mutations, because those don't actually help us survive or anything like that. Let's see. He claims that fossils are circumstantial evidence. I would highly disagree with this, because he also cast doubt on the whole deep time and how that's kind of a sort of a saving grace for evolution. And it's not a saving grace for evolution, it's just part of our reality. I mean, in order to disagree with deep time and fossils in general representing things in our past, you would have to forego like a lot of different scientific principles, like radioactive decay. Radioactive decay, allows us to actually gauge how long something has been around. And there's multiple different versions of radioactive decay. It's not just the carbon dating that everybody likes to hear about. There's also other ways to date things that are in the millions of years old. And that's how we actually date the fossils. You can either date the actual fossil or the rock that it's contained in, or you can look at the geologic column and see at what level it is in the geologic column and get a good idea of right about the time when that animal died. And those corroborate each other, obviously. He talks about Noah's 3 daughters being like some kind of like mitochondrial ancestor or whatnot. If you actually go to the Wikipedia page for the I forget what they're called. I'm sure Standing can let you guys know. It's the L, M, and N things. If you actually go there, L was first. That's mitochondrial Eve, if I'm not mistaken. And then if you follow the tree down, M and N come in on the 3rd level, and those are only split off of the middle, like L3 and 4 or something like that, genes. So I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for those 3 women at the exact same time to be representative of all those 3 things. Not to mention the fact that those particular genes date back way farther than 6,000 years.
20 seconds left.
Okay. He talks about genomic decay and the loss of information. I still didn't hear a good explanation as to what this information is, or how, or what it would look like for something's DNA to decay or degrade. I still don't know what that actually means. So if he could enlighten me about that.
Thank you very much.
Also, DNA is not a code.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will move into the 25-minute open discussion. So this is always my favorite part. It's exciting, engaging, and setting the timer for 25 minutes. The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Awesome. Well, you know what? I think, I appreciate your rebuttal there. I think a good way to start it, since it's probably going to, consist of a large portion of our discussion, would be, because I heard you say that, evolution for the most part, at least biological evolution, would mean, a change in allele frequency or gene frequency in populations over generations. Would you agree with that as a valid definition for biological evolution?
Well, yeah, I think that's specific enough, I guess.
I mean, do you believe that there would be any types of limits to that, like whether it's genomic, physical limits? Like, do you believe, let's say, do you believe you can get a dog, say, ever as big as, say, an elephant or a whale? We know there's animals that exist that are as big as, say, elephants and whales, or even a dog as small as, say, a flea. We know there's insects that exist that are as small as a flea, like a flea. So do you believe there's any type of limits to the change?
Well, I mean, obviously there's limits, because how an organism is actually, I guess built, if you will, it kind of dictates like how big it can get and whatnot. Like, you can never have a lizard as big as Godzilla. that's fantasy, obviously, but there's a lot of different limitations to that size. Things would have to work differently. But I also think that just like with the fact that there are elephants and there are whales, if dogs started changing in that direction, they would just develop differently and be able to be that big, and they would no longer be dogs.
Right. So let's just say if we look at what's empirically verified, like if we actually see, so I imagine you believe that, dogs, elephants, whales, pine trees and fleas are all related through common ancestry. But if we see, dogs today producing a variety of dogs, like obviously you got dogs that can adapt to heat, dogs that can adapt to the cold, but you're never going to get a dog to grow wings and fly. It's just not in the genetic code. You can believe something like that.
Do you seriously think that's what evolution is?
Evidence. Go ahead.
I mean, do you seriously think that that's what evolutionary theory says?
What I want to know, no, I know that it's not going to say that a dog is directly, it's incremental changes over time, of course, because I know you.
Okay. Can I, sorry to interrupt, Standing, but I need to know, why then would you characterize it as such a dramatic change if you know that's not what evolution is? That's a straw man fallacy. This is basic logic here.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you. No, I don't believe it's a straw man, because at some point you believe there is a single-celled organism that evolved into a multi-celled organism, a fish, an amphibian, a bird, a monkey, a man. These incremental changes would require, because if we're talking about that type of micro evolutionary variation, where you get that change in the frequency of the expression of different traits, me and you, we're not disputing that. And that type of evolution obviously explains the survival.
No.
But not the arrival of this. If we see dogs produce dogs, how can you say that a dog today came from something that was non-dog long ago and far away? Where's your empirical evidence for it? If you believe there's limits, of course.
Okay, so first I'll answer what you were talking about first. So we know this because of fossil evidence that we found. We've found fossils in the past that connect dogs to a proto-dog-like animal, and you can trace all of those all the way back. This is another thing that evolutionary theory predicts, is that we'll find fossil series. And so we know the evolutionary line of dogs and what came to be dogs, what we know dogs to be now. But still, you totally strawmanned evolution, and I can't let that go.
Well, I'm not really strawmanning it, because you just admitted that. I'm sorry to interrupt. You just admitted that. Well, obviously you're appealing to fossils. Yep.
1 sec. Just because I know that I think there were maybe 2 points that you made. I want to give Godless Engineer a chance to respond to each one. I think there. Yeah.
No. As long as you get equal time, and then I can address that as well. Go ahead.
All right. I'll let you. Just let me hold on. So, you characterize evolution as a dog producing a dog with wings. I mean, is that not how you characterized it?
Well, what I'm saying is obviously based on built-in genetic adaptation.
Yes or no questions,
dog. Well, you can take every single dog in the world today and throw them into Alaska, and they're going to adapt. You're going to see over time, you're going to see those traits that are emphasized. You're going to have a population of, say, something like a husky, or take those dogs and put it into the deserts of Australia. Over time, you're going to get those traits emphasized through natural selection, not random variation. You're going to see probably populations of dingoes, right? Short legs, skinny legs. But at the end of the day, you're still only going to get dogs producing more dogs. You're the ones that's saying dogs and elephants and pine trees are related through common ancestry, and you're looking to the fossil record, which I did say was circumstantial evidence, because if all we see is change that's opposite of what is required for that type of pond scum to people evolution, well, you can believe in it all you want, but I'm just telling you that it's not empirical verified science, because we don't observe. And you can appeal to time, of course, all you want, and you can appeal to the fossil record all you want, but what do we see in the fossil record? We see stasis for the most part. We see something like a coelacanth, which according to evolutionists is millions and millions and millions of years old, and then it just disappears in the fossil record for millions and millions of years, and all of a sudden there they are swimming in the ocean today. So there's a lot of inconsistencies with your claims on the fossil record. That's why I believe you might be able to cherry pick some, proto dogs, quote unquote. But at the end of the day, those proto dogs would still be considered a dog to any 5-year-old today. But you're the one that's saying a dog today actually came from something legitimately non-dog long ago and far away. And I'm here to tell you that that's okay to believe that, capital B, but clearly there are limits, genomic, physical, you admitted that. You did say, I think, that, a dog today probably could, given enough time, given enough change, become something as big as an elephant, but it's just not observable science. All we see is limits. That's consistent with, what we would believe based on, say, pre-existing heterozygosity, pre-existing genetic built-in adaptation. Just seems
okay. Can we stop this Gish Gallop?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was waiting for you to stop, but you just kept on going. Okay, so all right. Honestly, I can't even recall what you were talking about there, because you just kind of seemed to go off on a diatribe. You were denigrating the use of fossils. I would like for you to explain to me, like on your Bible model here, how do you explain all of the different fossils from extinct animals that look incredibly similar to the next species, and then the next species, and then the next species? Answer me, how does the Bible explain those extinct species? But then also, why is it that God has made a linear progression from one animal to another to make it look like they evolved from one another? What are those two things?
Okay, well, I appreciate the questions. First off, and I'll answer it as thoroughly as I can, I would say to weaken, the fossil evidence, that you're using. Obviously, fossils, bones found in the dirt, they're not inherited. Traits are inherited. That's why when we look to genetics, we see that it confirms biblical creation. But if you actually want to talk about how we explain the fossil record, well, of course, we explain, when you look at the geology of, say, the Earth, we would say, and I think it's pretty obvious, that, present processes can't in any way, shape, or form explain what we actually see. Rather, what we see points to, catastrophic processes in the past, which I would say, and you were kind of appealing to uniformitarianism earlier, but I think the catastrophic processes that we clearly see, with all the sedimentary layers and so on and so forth, that'd be confirmation of Noah's flood. I mean, I think all the evidence would point to, rapid plate tectonics and all the layers of fossils, all the fossils you actually see. The fact that we see stasis, that's strong indication that, biblical creation would better explain it. And secondly, we would see burials by ecosystems. So I think that's better explained as compared to, slow and gradual evolution and slow and gradual uniformitarianism. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me ask something real quick. Why is it that we only find certain fossils in certain layers? Why is it that we never find a fossil that is supposed to be older in the upper layers, like where it's younger, but we know that those particular organisms didn't exist at that time? Like, why aren't there any fossils of them trying to swim up through the geologic column? They're all laid down very nice and neat in a column, very ordered. Now, uniformitarianism can explain this. How does the Bible explain it? Because a flood does not actually explain it. You're not actually giving me any kind of explanations. You're just saying, oh, well, God did it, and that's it.
Well, I mean, I can give you a testable, falsifiable prediction based on what I talked about, catastrophic plate tectonics. I don't know if you'd agree, but I've had evolutionists agree that it does at least look like that there's evidence that the Earth was once underwater. I mean, if you want to talk about fossils, we see marine fossils on mountains and in landlocked areas that are actually far from the sea. And we see, sedimentary rock layers that actually extend, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, over entire continents or even farther. So it at least appears that the deposition of those layers, they had to have been catastrophic, or else there would not have been much fossilization to begin with. I mean, how do you explain fossils to begin with? What do you see? You see fossils of animals giving birth, fish being eaten. Doesn't that suggest sudden and rapid burial? I mean, it seems like all these observations, they are in accord with the biblical flood of Noah, which
so
covered
standing
the entire Earth thousands of years ago. I mean, that would be my answer. Go ahead.
Okay, so standing, how are mountains formed?
Well, we look to catastrophic plate tectonics to explain let's say Mount Everest or the Himalayas, for example, immediately post flood. We look to you would look to continental drift. We actually look to continental sprint, meters per second continental sprint. And we actually have made a testable and falsifiable prediction. If you can kind of let me explain it, for example, we would say that...
Well, you haven't actually answered my question yet, so I'm a little agitated at this point.
I just told you through plate through plate
Okay, well, see,
tectonics.
that's I mean, catastrophic plate tectonics is not how mountains are formed. Mountains are formed slowly over long periods of time when
Exactly.
shit
No,
pushed up
exactly. But
as the plates
that's how
move.
you think
But
they're created.
no, this is
I'm
how
saying we looked
science
at
Hold on.
this
catastrophic
is how
plate
science
tectonics.
has
We looked at
proven that
slow
proof.
uniformitarian tectonics.
gotta-
I don't want you to misrepresent me. Sorry, go
Just
ahead.
want to make sure you give him a chance to respond, Standing.
Well, I just don't want to be misrepresented. He's saying that mountains are formed from slow uniformitarian processes. I'm saying they're formed
Yes.
from fast uniformitarian. And I've actually made a testable falsifiable prediction.
Mountains do not shoot up from the ground, Standing.
Mountains formed by the uplifting and collisions of the plates as a result of catastrophic plate tectonics that I'm talking about. I mean, all rock layers have ripple marks, meaning there was a global flood in the past, and the flood sorted animals by ecosystems. Like I said, sea creatures first, then land creatures, as you would expect in a flood. That's exactly what we see. And I've got a testable, falsifiable prediction that has been confirmed to give you evidence for everything I'm saying. I mean, I can either give it to you or not, but the evidence seems to correlate perfectly with the flood of Noah. I mean, I've answered your questions. You just don't seem to like it because you still have that uniformitarian assumption.
Oh,
Unfortunately.
you mean the mainstream science explanation of it? Yeah.
Well, the thing is, high mountains cannot reach that high unless a catastrophe with meters per second movement, not slow, gradual inches per second per year, like you're talking about. Uniformitarian.
What evidence do you have for that statement?
That, man.
Have you seen a mountain form immediately, like right in front of you, or something like that? Like, have you seen that happen or something?
Well, the global flood is an unrepeatable, unobservable event. That's why we've made a testable, falsifiable prediction. For example, these continents, according to the Bible's description of the fountains of the great deep breaking open, these continents are moving at rapid paces through the floodwaters. So the pre-flood ocean crust, it's dragged down into the mantle core. We call that subduction process, of course. But the prediction comes into play when the cold ocean crust should actually still be cold, since obviously, according to our model, this occurred only thousands of years ago, even though it has descended into the deep hot mantle. So seismic data actually, and you can look this up to yourself, I can provide the paper from NASA, it's actually revealed enormous slabs of cool rock that are under North America. So down in the core itself, what I'm saying, which should be warm, it's actually confirmation of flood geology. And we've seen rapid magnetic reversals, also confirmation of the flood. So everything I'm saying, it's not just a just so story.
I don't see how that's confirmation of a flood happening. Can I ask like a totally different question?
Like, do you want to move off the topic of, if you want to move off flood geology for now and go back to, because you can ask me another question, but then I want to ask, because I kind of noticed that you didn't really address much of my opening presentation in regards to mitochondrial Eve.
When have I had time, Standing?
Well, in your rebuttal period, wasn't that to address my opening? Because in my rebuttal period, I addressed your opening for the most part.
How many minutes did we get for our rebuttal, Standing? 5 minutes? You expect me to go through all of your claims and everything like that in 5 minutes?
But
I don't have the luxury of just being like, God did it.
But the thing is, that was well, for one, I've already shown you that my explanations are not based on God did it, and even the speciation.
Actually, that's the only thing that you have said. You have said that, the geologic column, the thing that we said there, how'd that happen? Oh, God did it. And how do you say that? Oh, the flood did it, which God did. And then everything else has been because God did it.
I've given you testable and falsifiable predictions that actually confirm what I'm saying.
How are they falsifiable? Give me one of the things that you have said. Tell me how it's falsifiable.
Okay, why don't we go into the pre-existing heterozygosity model, for example? We would
no. Flood. We were talking about flood. You want to stay on flood. Let's do flood. Tell me, how were your statements falsifiable?
The statements that I just told you about the global flood being falsifiable in regards to the catastrophic plate tectonics model, if you want me to go into it again, we would predict, based on the fact that the fountains of the Great Deep broke open and that we're looking to catastrophic plate tectonics versus slow and gradual uniformitarian processes. For one, the mountains that I'm talking about that are formed from the uplifting and the collisions of the plates as a result of this, we've made a prediction. So we predicted that the cold ocean crust, if our model is true, it should still be cold, since this occurred only thousands of years ago. So
how is that falsifiable? Tell me, how is that falsifiable?
It would be falsifiable if we were to test that, okay, as we made the actual prediction about the cold ocean crust being still cold because it's only occurred thousands of years ago. If that wasn't true, it actually was warm or hot like it should be down in the core itself, that would falsify the actual theory. But what we've seen based on seismic data from NASA, it's revealed enormous caps or slabs of cool rock under North America. So that was a confirmation of catastrophic plate tectonics. I mean, it's right in the Bible, found in the Great Deep.
How does that prove it? I mean, I'm not really seeing the actual proof here as far as it being distinguished from the scientific model, because we're far off from like the evolutionary model at this point. Okay, this is geology and shit. So now how is that different from the evolutionary model or the scientific model in general? Because on the scientific model, the Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago, and then the Earth's crust cooled sometime later.
Obviously there's a lot of storytelling.
Hold on. I'm not finished, Standing. I'm not finished. I want to hear what you got to say, but let me finish. And then it cooled, and then like the oceans eventually came about, and continents and everything like that, and then plate tectonics were there, which there are actually still like lava that spews out from the seabed floor on occasion. That's how some islands were even formed. So I'm trying to figure out here how that particular prediction is actually in favor of your model and against the regular scientific model, because I don't really I don't see you refuting the current scientific model. I just see you planting your flag saying, "Oh, this proves God."
Okay, well here, let me go. So you're the one that brought up fossils. You're asking me, how do I explain the fossil record? How do I explain the geology according to my model? Then we talked about mountains, and I'm telling you that high mountains cannot reach that high unless a catastrophe with meters per second movement, according to the catastrophic plate tectonic model, were to occur, not the slow, gradual inches per second per year that you're actually talking about. I've given you a testable prediction that's actually been confirmed, and you can actually look at the articles that actually support this seismic data. So I'm explaining to you how, I mean, obviously we veered off of, say, genetics and evolutionary theory, towards this, but I've now given you a testable prediction based on the fact that the fountains of the Great Deep break open, the Earth is fractured like an eggshell. We look to this model of catastrophic plate tectonics, and there's your confirmed prediction. So in regards to that would confirm flood geology. If we want to look to genetics, if we want to look to... Go ahead. I don't know how much more I can... I mean, you asked for evidence. You're the one who brought up in your opening, science, empirical science. It's all about testable and falsifiable predictions. So that's what I'm...
Actually, I didn't say anything about that. I said that one of the key factors of any scientific theory is its predictability. The ability of the model or the theory to predict things that we would find in reality. That's what I actually said.
Well, okay, let me ask you in regards to, say, evolutionary theory, predictability, how much of our genome would you predict or would you say is functional? Like, do you have from what I've heard from evolutionists, it's a maximum of between 10 and 20%. Do you have a number that you can put on that?
Well, I mean, if you're just going to answer the question that you just asked me, I don't even know why you're even trying to get an answer out of me.
Well, because what I'm saying is...
It's pointless to ask a question and then immediately give my answer to it. I'm not saying that is my answer, because honestly, I don't know. And it's fine for me not to know. But the fact that however much of our genome is functional or whatever, that doesn't dispute all of the other evidence out there. It doesn't dispute anything, actually. It's just a statement that I don't know is even true.
Well, no, because genetics is actually where we can look to verify the competing hypotheses, and DNA function.
That's a good point to bring up. Explain the loss of information.
Well, for one, okay, I want to at least finish this because for the audience sake, I want to show them that we do have testable predictions in regards to DNA function. So if you don't want to give us, your answer to how much you believe that it is functional, we've already made predictions.
How is that going to help the conversation right now? I really don't understand, how me telling you how much of our DNA is functional.
Because I want us to have a good discussion on hypotheses, and we want to test those hypotheses to see whose model is is stronger. And I'm saying that we've predicted, based on our speciation model of pre-existing functional DNA differences, that we predict that the vast majority of our genome is actually going to be functional, is functional. We can see already that based on, say, for example, the ENCODE project, which has given us evidence that, you know, over 80% of our genome is at least transcribed in RNA, which suggests function. A lot of it is, you know, preliminary, but certain developmental windows were not tested during that. So we've actually put on paper this hypotheses and the predictions that flow from it. So you can actually go in the lab and test it yourself. That's why I'm asking you, okay, so we've made this prediction. The vast majority of our DNA differences, whether it's nuclear DNA differences, mitochondrial DNA differences, are functional. You can make a prediction as well, and then we can go test it, and that's what science is all about. So that's why, if you don't think that that's going to progress our discussion, we are talking about models here. So I think we should put forth competing explanations and hypotheses and then test them. Would you not agree?
I don't understand how we can test them here just for us. I mean, I am not fluent in that particular part of genetics, so maybe I can get back to you later. But what I can tell you right now is that whatever point that you're trying to make right here is not actually going to help you in the genetic debate. Because, I mean, can you please, I just really need to know before we're done with this conversation, what exactly is a loss of information concerning DNA, and also what does genetic degradation look like?
Okay, so if you want to get into that, I'm just going to add the other portion by saying that, and then I'll answer that question directly. Is the fact that evolutionists predicted a genome of junk, while we predict high levels of function, and now the trajectory is pointing us towards high levels of function. For example, as ENCODE has revealed. So I'm just saying that our model.
I disagree with everything that you just said, because I really don't think that is what evolution predicts. Genome of junk. So,
well, of course, evolutionary leftovers, genome fossils, of course, that's what they predict. But we can move on if that's what you'd like. So if you're looking at, what was that? Did you say something?
If Godless Engineer is finished, then I'll not interrupt you. Otherwise, if there was something you wanted to add, I just want to make sure that he got to have his say back as well.
No. How much time do we have in the discussion portion? I just want to make sure we got enough time for this.
Minute 15.
Okay, then for that exact question, we know it's a fact, and hopefully you agree with it, that, you know, we transmit a small amount of mutations to our children. It's generally known that the mutation rate is now 100 mutations per person per generation. How much of those is near neutral and neutral is debatable, and we could probably talk about that for hours and hours. But we can actually look at certain mutations like duplications, inversion mutations, deletions. We can look at shifts from
45. I got to forgive me. Just so Godless Engineer gets the last like 45 seconds or so of the live discussion, I just want to interject. Just forgive me. I know that you're trying to give a response. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that it's like roughly fairly balanced.
No problem. So to make it short, to measure, you know, information loss, we can look at shifts from heterozygosity to homozygosity. We can look at deletions in the genome. You know, a deletion in a genome implies that something has been lost. And I know it's an evolutionary tactic to avoid the fact of genetic degeneration by saying, well, what does that mean, loss of information? Well, we know that all mutations are deleterious. We know that beneficial mutations are overwhelmingly rare. I mean, everybody admits to that. So that is what we see as a loss of information. Go ahead. I'll give you the remaining time.
Scott, about 45 seconds.
Okay, so actually everything that he said there about genes, mutations, everything is completely wrong. I still don't know what loss of information means, because it's a lot like saying, oh, Diet Coke is a loss of information from regular Coke. It's not different. It's not a loss of information. They're just different things. They're different chemicals. And that's basically what it boils down to, is that genes or DNA is a chemical. And differences in that chemical between one chemical and another person's chemical is not a degradation or a loss of information. It's just a change in genes. So I don't know what this degradation actually looks like. I don't know what loss of information looks like.
Okay, well, I guess, I mean, if you want to deny the fact that a deletion of a DNA letter is not a loss of information.
Standing, I'm sorry. Just we'll let you respond during your closing. I know that you have a response, and that's why I feel terrible. I know that each of you guys always has a rejoinder in the in the barrel ready to be shot, but I just want to make sure that we keep on going with the format. With that, we do have 4-minute closings, and we had started with Standing for Truth. So, Standing for Truth, if you want to carry your conversation right over into that 4-minute, you're welcome to. I will set the timer for 4 minutes, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you know what? Evolutionists like Godless Engineer here, they have to avoid the fact of admitting that, there is genetic degeneration, because evolutionists, they assume that mutations, for example, that they're the creator, but we know they're the destroyer. Mutations are not construction, they're destruction. That's what we see. They assume that these mutations have a net neutral effect, which we now know is wrong. And the major problem here, and he gave us some examples of, lactose intolerance and all these things, which can all be explained either through a loss of information, and he wants to know what a loss of information, for example, what that is. But the best beneficial mutations, they're mostly reductive. I'll give them an example. Sickle cell anemia, for example, it has a significant impact, but it's a broken gene, it's a broken protein. In the long run, it's not taking things forward. If he wants to take his fish to fishermen, if he wants to take his particles to people, he's going to have to take things forward. There needs to be a net gain in information, and all we see is a net loss of information. For example, natural selection, no one disagrees with that. Beneficial mutations, of course, are mostly reductive, as I've shown here with sickle cell anemia. If it's a broken gene and a broken protein, that implies a loss of some kind. So it's an evolutionist tactic to avoid the obvious data by asking, questions like, well, what is a loss of information? I mean, that is exactly what we see, is 100 new mutations per person per generation. Beneficial mutations are rare anyway. Sometimes I just say, give them 1 or 2 beneficial mutations, because 1 or 2 rare beneficial mutations are not going to counterbalance the information loss. He did bring up, I'm trying to touch on everything. He did bring up, radioisotope dating, and that's used to date igneous rocks. And these are rocks which, form when hot molten material cools and solidifies. And the radioisotope dating, for example, the clock, it starts when a rock cools. And once the rock cools, there's assumption there that the more atoms can escape, and any daughter element found in a rock will be the result of radioactive decay. But the dating process then requires measuring how much daughter element is in a rock sample, and then knowing the decay rate. For example, uranium into lead or potassium. But these are all based on assumptions, okay? Obvious, unknowable assumptions. For example, the initial conditions of the rock sample are accurately known, or the amount of parent or daughter elements in a sample has not been altered by processes other than radioactive decay. I've given actual evidence in genetics. Bones found in the dirt, they're not inherited. Traits are. I've given testable, falsifiable predictions on flood geology, catastrophic plate tectonics. What do the rock layers show? Ocean waters flooded over the continents. Evidence? Well, we see marine fossils in rock layers covering the continents, widespread, rapidly deposited rock layers. More evidence, the rock layers that, can actually be traced all the way across continents and even between continents. And I look to the ENCODE project that
38 seconds.
How much? 30 seconds?
38 seconds.
38 seconds. Hopefully in his closing, he can actually address, the evidence that I gave about a literal Adam, a literal Eve, the 3 major haplogroups. I mean, these 3 LMN, they're unique. They're separated by small differences, and the lines radiating out, they're long, indicating, more differences. And we've made predictions based on the placement of the L. And all of genetics points to a biblical-based model and points away from an evolutionary model. Thanks so much, James.
Thank you, Standing for Truth, for your closing statement. And Godless Engineer, I've got the clock set at 4 minutes for you. I'll start on your first word.
All right. So I think that mostly what I've heard here tonight, which Standing will disagree with, is basically God did it. God made all of these things in the ways that they are, and therefore, because the Bible says so, it is so. And I feel like that's what his argument boils down to. And any of his supplemental evidence or information is only used to back up the biblical model. And so that's why I feel like he's using a lot of pseudoscience here in order to justify his position on the matter of evolution. He wanted me to go over like the Adam and Eve thing. You know, it's funny that he mentions that because there's actually not enough genetic diversity in only two individuals for spawning an entire population of a species. So you're going against a lot of genetic information, like a lot of genetic studies and a lot of basic like science that you would have to forego in order to make the assumption that there literally were only two humans that started out and created by God or whatnot. And if you disagree with that, which I'm assuming that you do, they're standing for truth. Then I would want you to tell me, what does the perfect human look like to you? Starting out, like what did Adam and Eve look like exactly? That they were so perfect that they were able to, spawn an entire population of organisms just off of them two. Also, I would love to hear exactly how that population, like that repopulation effort worked there, both for Noah and for Adam and Eve. But anyways, Standing for Truth likes to speak of DNA as if it were a computer system or a computer language. DNA is chemistry. And so it is bound by the laws of chemistry and therefore acts in a chemical way. So the information that he's talking about here are different chemicals that appear in DNA. And there's a lot of different processes that go into how DNA is both read and generated and copied and all of that. And so him saying that it's information, like it's some kind of like computer code, is really disingenuous and does not actually represent what DNA actually is. I didn't hear any good explanation as to what a loss of information is. He brought up sickle cell anemia, which is a genetic mutation that results in a disease that is not survivable. But I mean, I would lump that into the bad mutation part with whatever kind of extra things that may come with sickle cell anemia. If it affects the survivability, it would be considered a bad mutation and detrimental to the organism.
A minute 5 left.
5 seconds?
No, it was a minute and 5 seconds.
Oh, minute and 5. Okay. So I didn't really hear a good description of what genomic decay is, or any what like gene degradation is, or what does it look like for an organism's genes to degrade. I mean, honestly, you would expect to see, like, I guess a lot more of genetic diseases and stuff come about, maybe. But even then, on the evolutionary model, you would expect to see those types of changes in a population, especially with how many people there are on the Earth, and the fact that we've moved into an era of humanity where natural selection no longer has a direct effect on our survivability. So, another thing is that he uses this genetic entropy, like I was talking about before, and one of the foremost proponents of it, Sanford, actually acknowledges that experiments have not borne any data that indicates genetic entropy.
Excellent. We are just in time, so thanks so much, Godless Engineer, for your closing as well. And we will now move into the Q&A. So forgive me if I think I've caught every question. So forgive me if I haven't, but I'm really confident we're like staying on it pretty well. So with that, thanks for your patience, and I'm going to set the timer. I know that in case I had missed any new subscribers, I did just want to give a welcome to the ones that I for sure saw up on the screen. I want to say thanks, Nick Piazza, for joining us, as well as ADP _ OZ, Carl Leo, Chrismer, Steve Garnett, N/A, NA, and then Derek Smith, Heavy Holler. Thank you all very much. We're stoked to have you here. And as mentioned at the beginning, we're kind of trying to build an eclectic community. We love diversity of thought. And so no matter where you are in terms of your views or lack of views, whatever you want to say, we're glad you're here. So with that, jumping right into them, I'm going to try to make this quick so that we can get through as many as possible. I'm Sorry Wilson said, thanks for your super chat. We appreciate it. They said, so a dog from a non-dog would prove evolution, or would it disprove it?
Who's that to? Is it me or?
I'm not sure. If you both want to respond, you can, but I wasn't sure
Well,
myself.
Well, I mean, as far as evolutionary theory goes, dog to non-dog would take place over a lot of generations because of the buildup of mutations that occur in an animal. Plus, if the animal changes environment, that can also induce necessary changes in various ways. And so it would take a long time for it to become a non-dog, but eventually you would have an organism that is not recognizable as a dog.
You got it. And then Sandy, if you want to respond, you can. Standing, are you alive? Standing.
You're muted, standing. I don't
Oh.
know if you're talking.
Oh, sorry about that, guys.
Scared me there.
No,
Sorry.
You're like, where'd he go? Yeah, I would just say, obviously, what does empirical science, tell us? It tells us that, dogs produce dogs. And evolutionists will always say, well, of course, dogs produce dogs. The law of monophily, we can never outgrow our ancestry. A eukaryote will never stop being a eukaryote. A mammal will never stop being a mammal. But at the end of the day, that's why they have to appeal to time. When you ask them, well, then do you believe dogs today ultimately came from something that was non-dog long ago and far away? And of course they have to say yes. And then that's when they appeal to their, SpongeBob, fairy tale imagination, land of dogs, elephants, and pine trees being related. So I think that's where you jump from, a simple change in allele frequency and populations over time into something that's just not demonstrable or observable.
Can I clarify something real quick, James?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so I did notice that there were some people in the chat saying no, it would still be a dog. And that's why I emphasized that it would take a long time for something like that to happen. But like in the case of whales, you have a quadruped land animal that moved into, more watery area and kept moving deeper and deeper into the water. And then eventually it lost its hind legs. And, we have fossil evidence for all of this. So, I mean, I'm saying that given the correct situation, the correct environment and whatnot, it could eventually change into something that doesn't look like a dog, because whales and dolphins do not look like the quadruped land animals that we see that were the proto ancestors of them. So that's what I was explaining. I was just trying to explain the evolutionary process, I guess.
Well, I think if I could just say one last thing,
So
because
sorry, Standing. Just because you wanted to make a clarification, I know you have you always have a round in the chamber ready to be fired. I know both of you guys do, but
I'm sure we could go on for another 25 minutes. You're right.
Let's see. Canderman, thanks for your super chat as well. He asks, question for Godless Engineer: why do you consistently let him not answer your question? So.
Well, I really tried to hold the fire to your feet. They're standing on loss of information and genetic decay. I still don't know what those mean, but I didn't want to get hung up on one particular thing. I didn't want to get hung up on one particular topic or subject, so it's just a circular argument kind of thing. I did want to move past it, and that required some concessions on my part. In general, as I'm sure Standing felt that he had to make some concessions to move on and whatnot on his.
Well, yeah, I do appreciate the fact that I think within the 25 minutes, we touched on a number of things: flood geology, genetics, evolutionary theory in general. So I think that was good. I do obviously believe that I did address, your question of a loss of information in regards to just mutations in general, whether you're looking at deletions, inversion mutation, duplications. You can actually sequence the genomes. You can put two genomes side by side, and you can see reductions in fitness. For example, you can see a shrinking.
I'm so sorry. I know that I hate to do this just to get through as many questions as possible. Standing, I hate to do that.
I just wanted to force that out. Sorry, James.
We're gonna try to jump forward. Brian Stevens, thanks for your super chat. And also Tech Satan, if I'm pronouncing it right, thanks for subscribing. We're glad to have you here. I saw that. You're right. So Brian Stevens asked, he said, this is true, and since it's true, it's falsifiable. I wasn't sure what he was referring to. If either of you know, let him.
Well, I mean,
I
okay, go ahead, Godless Engineer.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think that he was simplifying what Standing was saying, being that, oh, I'm saying this is true, therefore it's falsifiable. He was breaking it down to its simplest components.
Well, and the thing is, that whole, God did it, or even if you're looking for a cure for cancer and you just say God did it, like, of course that's not going to advance science. And that's why, we've made very precise, very specific testable predictions. I'll use one example: mutation rates on the most divergent of African people groups, the Khoisan peoples. They haven't been measured. We've actually made and put on paper a direct prediction on what their mutation rate will be. And the evolutionist can go do the exact same thing. The evolutionist actually doesn't want to, for many different factors, many different reasons, but we've gone and done that testable prediction. That's not the only one. I mean, we can go on and on and on. The DNA code itself, the functionality versus non-functionality. So now it's not just God did it. We're actually taking, something from the Bible, making a testable prediction and making it falsifiable. So I disagree with the fact that it's just God did it. We've got confirmed predictions and future predictions. So I just don't want to be misrepresented, of course.
Gotcha. We just to move forward really quick. Sigifredo Sarabia, thanks for your super chat. They had said, so God made the earth, and God was like, hold up, this thing is boring, it needs more things. I'm going to put dinosaurs on that dirt, dinos on that dirt. Then he was like, why did I put dinosaurs on that earth? I think they're trying to say, like, why would God make dinosaurs and then kind of like regret it later?
Well, I don't think he regretted.
Why would they
I
go
think he
extinct?
regretted dinosaurs. Who's that question to?
I think
It was a
you
super chat.
saying.
Oh, okay. It's kind of more of a statement. Yeah, if you want to say something, Godless Engineer, go ahead.
Oh no, I mean, I feel like the statement is more in the vein of like, why does God allow things to go extinct, or why has 99% of life on Earth actually died or gone extinct?
Well, exactly, and that's why, according to the biblical base model of the fall, the fact that the Bible records a time when people had extremely long lives, and we look to mutation, low impact mutation accumulation to explain the lifespan decrease of, say, early biblical characters. So based on the fall, that's why we see this death, degeneration, extinction. That's what we would expect, devolution in regards to a biblical based model. But evolution, predicts and expects the exact opposite of that. So that's why it's contradictory to all known empirical evidence. Dinosaurs, they would have been brought on the ark as well. That's why you see all these, dragon stories, legends of dragons, Alexander the Great, Marco Polo, St. George, story after story, legend after legend. You see hieroglyphics, artwork, pictographs. Even in the dictionary, I think hundreds of years ago, next to the word dragon, it said now rare. I mean, how do you explain that? The Leviathan, the Behemoth.
Sorry to cut in. I know that you got a lot to say, but I just want to, just so we can get through as many questions. Did each of you get to respond to that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Barry Switzer, thanks for your super chat. He said, standing for truth, you aren't making testable, falsifiable predictions. Those are simply ad hoc statements.
Well, no, so he obviously doesn't understand the fact that in regards to the LMN haplomap, there have been very specific predictions made on the most divergent peoples, say the Khoisan peoples, their mutation rates. There's been actual predictions made on because if this is a marker of time and this is the history of civilization, the LMN, they're very unique. You look at the map, usually I screen share and show that, but they've all seen the map. They're unique. They're separated by, shorter lines indicating, pre-flood times and post-flood times radiating out. So we should be able to read the map, the history of civilization, the Roman Empire, the Greeks, the Persians, and that's actually being done directly from this map. So that is, for one, there's confirmed predictions there and future predictions. So, I mean, they can just put their fingers in their ears all day and all they want, but it is testable and falsifiable predictions, all flowing from the placement of the L.
So sorry, just to keep you short.
I'm sick of the misrepresentations.
Just to keep you short and pithy, I've got to try to move to the next one. DePooch, thanks for your super chat. We appreciate it. I saw you didn't write anything, but if you do want to write anything, you can just put it in at Modern Day Debate as like a normal chat, and I can read it for you because we appreciate your super chat. Brian Stevens, thanks so much for your super chat. He said, caustics, namely, so it's Caustix, claims I don't understand logic because it took me a long time to respond to him. He's a genius, and his moral argument, Kalam, has convinced me of God. I'm not exactly sure.
I don't think that's a question. That's just a statement.
I think that might be for somebody, Caustix Soda in the live chat. I'm not sure.
It is.
That's I don't know if it's sarcastic or if you guys are buddies or if you're trying to headhunt. I don't know, but we appreciate your super chat, and that's good to know about Caustix. So we appreciate that. Next one, I'm sorry, Wilson. Thanks for your super chat. He said, this person said, Godless Engineer, where did the water go?
Where did the water go? That's a good question. Because in the flood model, do you know how much water it would have required to cover the entirety of the Earth? Because, I mean, I've calculated, and it's a crap ton of water. I mean, it's so much water that we don't know where that water went, because it's way too much water that's actually here on the Earth or even in our local group.
Well, where do you think the water came from according to Genesis? Just to see if you're strawmanning. What does Genesis say the majority of the water came from? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it came from up underneath the ground, but there's not, like I'm saying, all of the water on the Earth in general does not account for.
We have empirical evidence that there is water. Like, for example, when it talks about the fountains of the great deep breaking open and the windows of heaven were open, it's not like all this water just came from the heavens. You know, we know that there's subterranean chambers that you can actually see and observe today. And all the water, you can see it in the oceans. I mean, if you just flatten out all the continents, I mean, you're gonna flood the Earth. There's more to that.
Trust me, I know about flattening out the globe.
Gotcha.
See, the scope and scale of the energy produced by the flood is amazing, and I think that evolutionists, for the most part, they have kind of a warped view of what
we got to keep it short and pithy. We've only got 4 minutes left, or not even. This is embarrassing. I forgot to set the timer on the Q&A. That's super embarrassing. Let me find. I'm trying to think of a rough estimate. How long do you think we've been going for Q&A so far?
I think you're about right, 20, 21 minutes.
Okay, so let's say we have 4 minutes left, and I hate to cut in, but just next one, we appreciate those. And also, Candor Man, question from Candor Man, thanks so much. They asked, ask Standing for Truth why deleterious mutations haven't made bacteria die out.
Well, that's a good question. I think it was last time that either himself or somebody else asked that. I can't remember. But what's interesting about bacteria, you can just Google, reductive evolution in bacteria, and they are known to lose genes, lose information. I know Godless Engineer is against losing information or what it means, but you can just read paper upon paper about reductive evolution in bacteria. And Lenski himself, he's actually observed and demonstrated reductive evolution, because the beneficial mutations, and there have been beneficial mutations observed in his experiment, but they've all been mostly due to reduction, loss of function, loss of promoter, loss of genes. And what they've done is they've gotten rid of genes short term, but it's long term degeneration. So Lenski, with his long term bacterial experiment, he's actually demonstrating genomic decay. And obviously bacteria, they're going to go through more rounds of natural selection. They have more generations than, say, humans and higher mammals. But even bacteria are being observed to lose information and be susceptible to this genomic degeneration. So it's everywhere. Viruses, bacteria, mammals, everywhere you look, there's genetic entropy.
Gotcha. We had a super chat come in. Thanks so much. I'm sorry, Wilson, who said, I'm sorry, could Standing for Truth let Godless Engineer answer? I think that's for you, Standing for Truth.
Does he want to answer what I just said or something?
What they said, I'm sorry, could Standing for Truth let Godless Engineer answer? I think they thought that you weren't letting Godless Engineer answer. If you want to respond, you can.
I think it was a fun debate.
Gotcha. Hold on one sec. I could have sworn the fellow Steven Steen either was trolling me or he had said that he shot a super chat in and I didn't want to miss it. I mean, you can never trust that guy, but give me one sec. I'm going to just quick see if I can find. And I could have... Next question, though, in the meantime, was Salem Coop. Thanks for your question. They asked, was there animal death before the fall? Can you give verses to back up your belief?
No, I don't believe there is animal. The Bible says that death came by one man, sin. So no, I don't believe that there is death before the fall. I think, for example, in regards to genetic entropy, I believe that Adam and Eve and the created kinds were created perfectly. For one, with heterozygous gene sites, so that would explain the genetic diversity that Godless Engineer said that there wouldn't be enough of. But I don't believe that there is death before the fall. And I think the fact that it says by one man death entered into the world, I think that's clear indication that there wasn't any death before sin, before the fall.
If I can ask real quick, Standing, what is your idea of a perfect man or perfect woman? Like, what do they look like in general?
What did Adam and Eve look like in the original creation?
Sure.
Well, I would say that based on, the fact that we inherit 100 new mutations per person per individual, you take that genetic entropy back to a point of least genetic entropy. I don't know exactly what they look like. I can't really draw you a picture, but that would be a genome of, for one, created diversity without any, mutational load, genetic load. So,
would blonde hair, blue eyes? Is that? You think blonde hair, blue eyes would be the perfect?
Well, I don't believe that they would have a belly button because they were the first created, and that's probably interesting because Adam and Eve's kids, they would know that Adam came directly from God, no belly button. They probably looked like if you were to do, like I always say, if you were to do blood tests and then weight and height, you're going to get evidence for, say, a young person and evidence for an old person. I say that's what we see in the universe as well.
If I can just cut in, forgive me, just so sorry, Sin, just to be short.
Good question. That's a good question.
To keep you short and pithy, we had a super chat. Stephen Steen did give a super chat. I missed this one. I'm sorry about that, Stephen. He said, James hands down won this debate with his smile. That's very sweet, Stephen. You have no idea how much that means. Let's see. Sigifredo, thanks for your super chat, Stephen. And also, Tommy Fuller, thanks for your super chat. They said, modern day debate out, standing for truth, why do creationists change subjects so often, i.e. biology, geology, cosmological, abiogenesis?
That's a good question. I think it's because trained creationists, we study and we research various subjects, while a lot of evolutionists you discuss, it seems like they want to stick to just one thing. And if you venture off to something else, they'll kind of say, well, I don't know much about that kind of thing. But they're the one promoting evolutionary theory, and yet they'll say things like, well, I don't understand genetics, all that much. Well, then why are you promoting? Why are you making all these videos, promoting evolutionism, debunking biblical creation? So I just think well-trained creationists, they're well-versed in a multitude of subjects. I think it's a good thing. I think it's an asset.
And then a quick follow-up question from Tommy Fuller. And thanks again for that super chat, Tommy, who asked, standing for truth, what is created kind? And kind they put in all caps. I think they're asking, what is a created kind? Or what? Let me make sure.
If an animal can bring forth, it's the same kind. For example, a wolf and a domestic dog, or a wolf and a coyote, they can interbreed. They're probably of the same kind. A wolf and a domestic dog, they can't interbreed with a banana plant or a pine tree. So they'd be different kinds. So if you can bring forth,
that's a bit disingenuous, don't you think?
No, I think I just gave you
how do you explain ring species?
ring species. I mean, if you look at ring species like squirrels and rabbits, I mean, any 5-year-old can tell you they're the same kind of animal. And the thing is, if you're losing the ability to interbreed, you're losing information. There's obviously,
but no, I mean, that totally, like, you're being hypocritical here, because on one hand you're like, oh, it's the ability of it to bring forth its own kind, but with ring species, they actually diverge so much genetically that they can't interbreed anymore. So like they wouldn't, like one particular species wouldn't be able to breed with another particular species and bring forth an organism. They would be genetically incompatible.
Well, you can look at genetics to identify what's actually, you know, related and what's not. For example, orphan genes, you know, taxonomically restricted genes, you know, that can be used to identify what's created, what's not. You can look at unique DNA differences, mitochondrial DNA differences across families, across genus. So there's multiple ways of, you know, breeding tasks. So if they could originally bring forth, yeah, they're of the same kinds. That's why we got to do various.
I know you guys have done a ton of reading, and so that's why I hate stopping you. Forgive me for that. Let's see.
That's a long 4 minutes, James.
That does bring us to the end of the Q&A, and I'm really sorry about that. This is we're thinking about doing something different, namely because thanks. Gosh, sorry about this. Okay, really quick, I want to read this off really quick, and then we have to close the Q&A intake. I'm sorry about that. Thanks for your super chat. I'm sorry, Wilson, who said GE and SFT are human animals. So, guys, remember that. Thanks for that super chat. We appreciate that. And
that's a good statement to end it on, I guess.
Yes, you guys are both beautiful animals. And we had thanks, Taliesin Overlander, for your super chat, who said, I just want to say, want James to say, woo, la, lu, la, you. So, thank you for that. We totally appreciate that. One thing that
we said we can't have fun while we're debating.
Yes, this has been fun. One thing we're contemplating, because I know that we sometimes have a challenge. We have a ton of questions, and they're awesome questions. And then it's like, I kind of want feedback, because sometimes we get super chats and we read those first, and I'm kind of like, and sometimes we run out of time for the questions in addition to this that come after we read the super chats. And that's something that some people have said, like, hey, especially for people who don't have super chat in their country, because if we sometimes read only super chats because we have a limited time, that's like, I'm like, oh yeah, it's not very fair for them. So let us know. We're going to try to think about how to handle that, because we only got through like a few questions at best from the question list after the Q&A, and so we're working on that. Maybe we would intersperse the super chats. I don't know. It's harder for us to go longer, but we'll try to figure out what we can do about that. But thanks for all of your questions and super chats. I want to say thanks so much to our debaters, though, the speakers. We've totally appreciated their time and their energy. This is a superb debate. I not only did everybody in the chat enjoy it, a lot of positive feedback. This is thrilling. So we really appreciate that. And if anybody wants to host an after show, let me know. We can put it in the description, and then we can even announce it if you want. And so thanks so much. With that, I want to say again, one last thank you to our debaters. Thank you for being here, guys.
Beer is awesome, especially in these situations.
Especially in these situations. John, are you getting nervous? Come on now. Is your religion being attacked?
Worn out places, worn out faces, bright and early for the daily races.
Well, you used a verb as an adjective there. You need to study grammar also.